Well, take advantage of this silence. Rare opportunity in a room full of alcoholics. Good. I'm a recovered alcoholic. My name's Tony. Sobriety date's April 8, 1989, and this is our...
My name's Joanne. I'm a recovered alcoholic also. Sobriety date is August 24th, 2014. For those of you that joined us last night and were able to listen to my share, I hope I shared effectively about how much a big book study workshop impacted my life and was the missing link in desired sobriety that seemed to escape me for many years. So we're going to attempt today to bring you the type of big book study workshop that Tony and I have the privilege to put on. Well, Tony does them multiple times a week, but we do one especially in our hometown in Langley in the very same room as our home group. We're going to hit some highlights. Usually we can spend a whole hour at a workshop on, something like step one and that step one experience that I shared about last night. But we're going to try to do this quickly and go through steps 1 through 5. So we're going to start this the right way. We're going to involve a power greater than ourselves and open up with some prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Okay.
All right, so we're discussing how most of us go through the steps when we're new is off the wall. Anybody, how many people sat in a meeting while they're reading how it works, wondering how it works? I wonder how this works as they're reading how it works, right? How many people here had looked up on the wall where they outlined the steps and kind of, yeah, that's not bad, and come up with their own terminology or their own understanding and go, well, I just done step 1, step 2, let's skip 3, 4, well, maybe. How many people's done that here? Okay, good, we're in the right room, the others are lying about it. But, and then how many people have listen to whoever sound the best in the room as they sound like they know what they're talking about, right? As in regards to what you're reading on the wall, and then started sharing their experience at the next meeting, right? And so soon, most of us, the genius type minds here, the chameleons, we formulate a talk based on what we've heard and what other people have shared. And we don't know whether it's actually based on fact or where it comes from or where that idea originates from. Does it have depth and weight? Could this possibly hinder my life or save my life? Like most of us don't have that information, and it's surprising how long you could be around this fellowship and still not get the information necessary in the participating of the saving of your own life. So what happens is a bit of history. I got introduced to the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous in 1978 through an intervention of some people who figured I had a serious problem. I realized I had a problem. So my first meeting, I was 16 years old. And then people started helping me and giving me their ideas on how to get this thing. And you hear what says, do all the suggestions. How many people's heard that? Do the suggestions. And so if you don't know what the information is behind the suggestions, whose interpretation do you have to use? Your own, what that means, right? So a lot of this I figured out on my own, and my recovery reflected that. Welcome back. Any relapsers here? Yeah, you guys are the hardest people to talk to because you already know, right? I know, right? You ever watch a newcomer when they come back? That's what I always ask people. Say, oh, how long you sober? They say, oh, 2 years. Again or for the first time? Because that seems to be the theme in AA is, again, like Joanne was saying last night, AA is designed for relapsers, but we're the only ones that don't think so, right? So we're going to start on page 59, and we're going to hit where it talks about here are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery, and we're going to break that down using the actual information behind the information that they're making statements on.
The hope is that while we do this, the practice of looking up on the wall at the banners that are typically in most meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, the hope is this practice of looking at the steps as if they're a checklist, right? Check. might get interrupted for you, right? When you consider an individual step, consider all of the information in our manual that helps you better understand and gives you the accurate information to better understand what it is that our founding members were talking about when they put that itemized list together and how it works. If you guys have questions, we're going to take a little principle that we use in general service, because usually the workshops are a bit interactive. We let hands up and answer questions, but we've got a big crowd in here and not a lot of time. So we're going to do an ask it basket. I think we put one up here. So if you have questions along the way, write them down, throw them in the basket up front. Feel free to come up front and put the questions in at any time. And we're going to answer the questions in the second portion of the workshop this afternoon.
So the difference between, you hear people say, well, it's a we program and the steps are on the wall and like the checklist. So here they're talking in past tense, they're not talking in present tense. What that means is if you're new, you're talking in a position of you still are powerless, but you don't know you're powerless, what the definition of that means. You felt the consequences of your actions or your life, and it's driven you into the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous. So when they say, here are the steps we took, what they're saying is they've already done it, right? And they're going to talk about their process that they went through. In order for me to understand what they went through, I would have to go back to the beginning of the book to see what they were talking about. There would be no way. I've never met anybody in our fellowship who's ever listened to how it works and understood how it works. Now, you need to go back and see what they're talking about, right? So this is chapter 5. When you tell a new person to read chapter 5, you're doing it without realizing it. You're really doing them a disservice because they don't know what you're talking about. This is really designed, when we read how it works in a meeting, it's really designed for the people that's already been through it to remind us what the new people are talking about in our primary purpose. We got to remember, remember these people are dealing with something they don't know what they're dealing with. We were fortunate enough to go through a process that we have the same collective experience as they do, right? So a collective experience means we all agree on certain points, what the problem is, what the solution is, and the course of action necessary to bring about this change. And that's what they're all agreeing here to. They all agree. It's a collective experience. It's not singular. From everything, from the problem to the solution. That's pretty astounding when you think about it, because you can go to a meeting now and you're wondering what kind of meeting you're in. Right? It's like, right? Because most people, and I'm going to say this because I'm leaving tomorrow, so most meetings, the consensus is that people have a generic idea based on things they heard, but they're really going with what other people said, not what the literature is talking about. So when they say here, we admitted we were powerless over it, we were, past statement, powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Unless you've been through this, you wouldn't know what they're talking about. So that's a statement that something has occurred in them of an understanding that they all agree on, the point. So what is it that makes us powerless over alcohol? So when we're starting with the book, because we'll start right at the title page. Anybody know what that is in the book? It's the first page, right? It's the introduction to this thing, which those of us who understand it, step 2, the beginning of step 2 is the receiving of this book without realizing it. It's the beginning of the understanding that there might be a different experience for us who are afflicted with or possibly with this illness, or we know people who are afflicted with this illness. And so when we have a debate within our own fellowship, it tells you there's 3 groups of people in AA, right? Those who are trying to figure it out, those who figured it out, and those who have done it. Right? You'll catch that on the way home. I see what he's saying now, right? And those who have done it can show you their ideas are based on something other than themselves. That's why they put this together. So you hear a lot of people, I don't even know how it's a debate, is do we recover from this? I'm recovering, we don't recover. Anybody ever hear that? They just told you they haven't been through the process. And how it works, those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. So the title page.
The story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism. And why this is important is how attractive would something be to somebody concerned with alcoholism if there is no result? If you are in a constant state of never actually getting to a result or a solution. So the statement that we are always in a state of recovering from alcoholism is already under debate right from this title page. If it's from their experience, the story of how many thousands of men and women have recovered from alcoholism, right? A solution, a result as a part of this process.
So how many people would like to recover from something that's kicking your butt or suffer with it for the rest of your life? How many people like the jail sentence? I'm doing life now in Alcoholics Anonymous, if you want what I got. Right? We're happy, joyous, and free. Somebody wanna, somebody wanna inform your face? Oh yeah, I want what you got, let me sign up. You know what I mean? So, anyways, I have these moments,
You might think that the word recovered is the most important part of this page, but really, we think the most important part of this page is the story of, right? That throughout what we're going to go through this morning, what we're doing is reconfirming what Tony had just sort of opened with, is that we're looking at this from their perspective and not from our own, right? Because if we are the person concerned with a drinking problem, we need a new perspective, right? We need a different point of view in regards to what we're suffering from. So it's their story of how they recovered from alcoholism. And if this is the only information we have thus far, right, we don't even know who they are yet. But it's first important to probably establish what this book is. And over on the preface on page 7, here comes all my anxiety over Roman numerals. Hopefully we do all right. Because this book has become the basic text for our society and has helped such large numbers of alcoholic men and women to recovery, right, a result, there exists strong sentiment against any radical changes being made in it. Therefore, the first portion of this volume...
What portion?
The first portion of this volume describing the AA recovery program has been left largely untouched.
I think my book has a typo in it. Isn't it supposed to say the first 164 pages?
Well, interestingly enough, it does not say that. If we're talking about pages 1 through 164, we'd be missing this portion of the book, because page 1 starts at Bill's story.
But it sounds nice, though.
It does. It sounds nice.
I've studied the
on a bumper sticker. Oh. Anyways. So, also understanding that the program itself exists where? In the first portion of this book, right? Meaning, I'm not a member of this program. I'm a member of this fellowship. And the program can only really be found in one place, spelled out in the first portion of this book.
So when they say get in the middle of AA, see, that changed. So if you're in the middle of AA, would you be in the book or sitting in the middle of a meeting? You'd be in the book. So if you weren't in the book, you're not in the middle of AA, because AA took its name from the book. And they put their collective experience together that those who will follow will have a direct line to this thing, which is pretty amazing. So if you're not in the book, you're not in the middle of this thing, which is, the book is the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, right?
So when we started on page 59, when it said we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable, we always take that as a like we are a part of the we, right? But really what they're talking about is their experience. And in the foreword to the first edition, it says, we of Alcoholics Anonymous are more than 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered is the main purpose of this book.
I like those guys that, well, they didn't all stay, you know, those happy alcoholics, they bring hope to me. Well, they didn't all stay sober. Oh, thanks for sharing. We almost had the new guy hopeful of the idea that there might be a solution. That's why I love it. They start with thousands, right? That's why later when you get into the understanding of it, not everybody in this room is going to die sober. Right? That's why they talk about those who are afflicted with this thing need to enter a daily reprieve from this condition. Right? And that's when they talk about that here is Go ahead.
For them, we hope these pages will prove so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. We think this account of our experiences will help everyone to better understand the alcoholic. Many do not comprehend that the alcoholic is a very sick person. And besides, we are sure that our way of living has its advantages for all.
And who misunderstands that the most is the new person. Right? Burn our lives to the ground. Nobody wants nothing to do with us. That's why we come here. There's nobody left on the Rolodex or the phone that we could borrow money from. The gig's up. Right? Anybody? Nobody, nothing. Like, all our calls are going to the answering machine. Like, nobody's taking our calls anymore, right? The only people looking for us is those with a warrant, right? So it's kind of like, and then we come to a meeting and people go, how you doing? Pretty good. Pretty good. How about we ask the people around you? No, let's leave them out of it. So you like we get conditioned to our condition, and we know there's something seriously going on, but we don't know what that is. But those of us who have recovered from this thing know what you're suffering from. We don't have to ask you a whole bunch of stupid questions. We already know your condition, right? That's just amazing. So when they talk about to show other alcoholics precisely how we have recovered, who recovered? Them. They're not going to show you how to recover. They're going to show us how they recovered. Big difference. How many people have been telling you how to do things your whole life? They're saying, we're going to show you what we did.
Big difference when somebody tells you what to do, between what to do and what they did to get a result, right? The chances that somebody will actually receive that information, especially an alcoholic, grows exponentially, right? When you can show me based on your own experience. So in the summarized portion on page 59 where it says we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable, we now know what they're talking about when they say we. They are talking about they, right? These people that have just been identified in the paragraph we just read. And they gave us a little bit of information, the seemingly hopeless state of mind and body.
How many symptoms? 2.
Mind and body. And if this is all the information we have so far, we don't necessarily know what they mean by that yet.
But that doesn't stop us from having an opinion on it.
That's why I like shortage of opinions in Alcoholics Anonymous.
Discussion meetings. I have no idea what you're talking about, but can I guess? Right? We talk. Am I getting close? I don't know.
But rather than going into their own ideas on what they mean by seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, the book is constructed in such a way that it gives us the next chapter, which is the doctor's opinion. Because it's probably got more depth and weight if we can start receiving some information about that seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, if it comes from somebody who's labored long in a medical field, in the treatment of people afflicted with alcoholism.
So, do they all agree on what they just talked about? Right? What they recovered from, how they recovered, and the process that they took. Are they all in agreement with that? Is it a collective experience or singular? Collective. So who's the only one outside of that understanding right now? Us, the reader, the person who just got this book. So that's why we suggest when people come to one of our workshops is pretend you have no influence by anybody in regards to this. You haven't listened to Joe and Charlie, you haven't listened to Pete and Sam, you haven't listened to that meeting. You're going with a fresh understanding of looking at this with a new pair of glasses, right? I love that book. But anyways, looking at this, what they're talking about, right?
So again, in the doctor's opinion, they open it up with we of Alcoholics Anonymous, just so that we're confirmed on who it is we're referring to. Introduce a well-known doctor, chief physician at a nationally prominent hospital specializing in alcoholic and drug addiction. So this is not somebody who is, off in another field somewhere that was paid for their time in order to write a reference letter. This is written at a time where doctors didn't want to have anything to do with drunks, right? So he puts together his intro, and over on the next page, it says, the physician who at our request gave us this letter has been kind enough to enlarge upon his views in another statement which follows. In this statement, he confirms what we who have suffered alcoholic torture must believe, that the body of the alcoholic is quite as abnormal as his mind. It did not satisfy us to be told that we could not control our drinking just because we were maladjusted to life and that we were in full flight from reality or were outright mental defectives. These things were true to some extent, in fact, to a considerable extent, some of us.
Some of us are learning to enjoy it today.
But we are sure that our bodies were sickened as well. In our belief, any picture of the alcoholic which leaves out this physical factor is incomplete. I was sharing last night, right, that clearly there was something wrong with me. But it was interesting to me and got my attention almost immediately when people started talking to me about this allergy, this phenomenon of craving, right? It explained a lot of things for which I could not otherwise explain. Why the zone of 6 to 9 drinks was like heaven to me, but I couldn't actually control my drinking enough to stay in that place, right?
We're just going to back up a second. This is, I think, the intro to the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous, where it began, right? And sometimes when we read things alone or in a group, we pass things because it's so subtle of the information that's being presented, but some of it's so profound that we miss it, right? And so when you look at the doctor's opinion, and he talks about to whom it may concern, I have specialized in the treatment of alcoholism for many years, which is interesting. Before 1934 is during Prohibition, right? They've already built a treatment center waiting for us. Build it and they will come, right? So, which is interesting. So this is I think, the whole setup to the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous. In late 1934, I attended a patient who, though had been a competent businessman, right, of good earning capacity, was an alcoholic of a type I've come to regard as hopeless. He's addressing two things here. He's addressing the characteristic of this person who have good earning potential, right? If he didn't have this illness, his life would look a lot different. He separates the illness from the human experience. He says this good earning, great guy, but he's suffering from this illness. If he didn't have this illness, he would have been quite successful in his life. So that kind of makes sense. All those times I was talking to something, what was I talking to? I was talking to this illness that had me, that I thought I had it. Why am I doing this? Why is this always happening? Anybody? It's kind of baffling. Look how well I've been doing, and then I find myself with drink in hand. So here's the where the miracle starts to happen. I had come to regard as hopeless. In the course of his third treatment, he acquired certain ideas concerning a possible means of recovery. As a part of his rehabilitation, he commenced to present these conceptions to other alcoholics. And he witnessed this. So this doctor worked with this one patient we'll understand as Bill, one of the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous. Right? So a lot of the stuff that you hear within our fellowship would have killed Bill. His experience would be the same, meaning until he acquired certain ideas and put those into practice, he wouldn't have recovered from the illness that's killing him. He's saying, this guy came into my facility 2 prior times. I've tried to work with him, but he's of the type that I've come to regard as hopeless, outside my reach of helping. Right? But his third time in treatment, right? He already had the disposition that this guy was of the hopeless condition. He had his mind made up in regards to Bill. The third time he went into treatment, there was something different happening, which we would call sponsorship. Somebody got a hold of this person who was dying from this illness and walked him through a course of action that this change became possible in his life as it was to the person who was carrying the message. That's what he's saying. And he's saying he witnessed this happen in his facility, the beginning of Alcoholics Anonymous, which is pretty remarkable that this doctor's seen this guy as hopeless based on 2 experiences with him. The third time, he acquired certain ideas, which is our program of recovery, that Bill didn't find, that he got walked through. Ebby found him, right? Bill didn't find Ebby. And Ebby came to pass his experience on to Bill. And Bill was inclined to be willing to do this process because there was nothing left for him to do. And that's the same like most of us in our fellowship. Right? When we run out of suggestions, then we do the program. I got a few more suggestions left. Let's not get carried away. Do you own a book? Yes. Do you know where it is? No. Okay, go ahead, sorry.
So based on that observation, and getting back to the seemingly hopeless state of mind and body, and we're talking in regards to that step one in the verbiage used in its sort of summarized form. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. And many of us might look at the wall and say, yeah, my life is unmanageable. I'm here, hello. You know, arrived with still putting out the flames of whatever had happened the night before. But we would miss what it is that they mean, right? What is it from their experience? And now when I say they, I'm not just talking about our founding members, I'm talking about the Friends of Alcoholics Anonymous that helped put this program together. Because without them, it wouldn't have been possible. And it's Dr. Silkworth that starts giving us the idea in regards to this state that impacts the body. The doctors,
Which is the first symptom in alcoholism.
The doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. As laymen, our opinion as to its soundness may of course mean very little, meaning from their point of view it might mean nothing, but coming from a doctor, that's a big deal, right? But as ex-problem drinkers, we can say his explanation makes good sense. It explains many things for which we cannot otherwise account, right?
So they're using terminology to best explain something that makes no sense to most people, right? But if you're afflicted with this and you get explained what they're talking about, an allergy is an abnormal reaction back then and even now compared to what most people experience when engaging in certain things, right? So they're saying that most people tend to drink sensibly. I don't know many of them. I'm married to one now, but it's kind of weird, but that's a different story. And these types of people seem to develop, which my sponsor explained to me, as a thirst. He says, do you get thirstier when you drink? I said, yeah, who don't? He says, most people. He says, most people aren't thinking about the next drink before they're finished the first drink, right? And we can rationalize anything, right? I always think about this story. I remember being in a meeting once, this guy said he was drinking something that was absolutely disgusting. Right, and I thought, I've never done that, but then I look back in my story, I've drinking stuff that make normal people sick. Like stuff that just because normal people don't drink that stuff, right? I'm not even gonna share the story. Part of my brain says, don't share it, it's being recorded.
Listen to that voice.
I'm getting better. before everybody would be like, oh my God. We'll save that for tonight.
I'm sure we're in a room full of people that probably have had the experience where it's like, it doesn't matter that there's a cigarette butt on the bottom of that, I'll just pick it out, right?
Yeah, God.
That's the cleanest we're gonna get. We believe, and so suggested over on the following page 24, we believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy, that the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. This is the first clue where we get well, not the first clue, it's the first statement, right, that we get from the doctor that helps us understand what sets an alcoholic apart as a distinct entity, right? Because lots of people in the fellowship have lots of human problems, but if we're talking about the problem of alcoholism specifically, we're limited to these two symptoms, right? This is what sets us apart as a distinct entity. This inability to control the amount we take once we get started. Go ahead.
So when we talk about these allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form whatsoever. So the debate that you hear people talking about, and this is, well, I'm just going to say it. Why worry about stuff now? So you hear people say, I was an alcoholic before I drank. How? What makes one an alcoholic? The allergy. That's what makes us different than other people. You may have had the human condition before you drank. That doesn't make you an alcoholic. Where you were raised, the things that happened to you may make you thirsty, but it doesn't make you alcoholic. So what that's saying is, where I was raised may have given me certain disadvantages in life, but it didn't make me an alcoholic. I have siblings that was raised in the same place who are not alcoholic. Some just don't drink and they can, which is boggling to my mind, right? And so whether I was born in the streets of Toronto, right, or the British properties, if I had this component, the only thing that changes is the nature of my story. but the story of alcoholism remains the same. That component doesn't change. That's what we all share. If I started sharing that, these different times when I went in just for a couple and ended up staying the whole night, or I separated the rent money from the drinking money and the grocery money and the support money. Anybody? All the best intentions on payday, right? Monday I'm wondering who I could borrow money from. Anybody? Excuse me, right? And so that's kind of, well, what makes me drink like that? What best intentions is, I'm just going to go in for a couple. And then they're doing last call, like there's no recall whatsoever. Where are you going to, like nothing more important than the next drink. Am I in the right room? Yeah. So that's what makes me alcoholic. It kind of makes sense. So when I talk about this thirst that happens, I was doing great, I'm going to family reunion, I'm going to behave myself. Anybody? Because the family's watching. Anybody? And then they're waking me up behind the bar because I didn't want to miss the party. I missed dinner, and I figured, where's the best place to pass out? I'm 17, so I don't miss the party. I said, I'll pass out behind the bar. The bartender got to wake me up. Right? That's logical thinking, isn't it? So they're all up there says, hey, we can't wake up this kid that's lying on the floor behind the bar. So I go, what are you doing here? I said, I didn't want to miss the party. Anyways, am I in the right room? Yeah, normal people don't act like that. How many people find that surprising? So when I talk about that, a lot of people say, yeah, I remember this. Yeah. So the need for another drink, regardless of my responsibilities around me. Yes, anybody? Now, if I started talking about the people I drank with and the lifestyle that I was living, not everybody would identify with that. Right? But what's the common component, regardless of what lifestyle I was in, if you had this component, this illness, this allergy, we would all have that common thread. So this is what makes an alcoholic, is the allergy, is the first symptom in alcoholism that makes us powerless over alcohol. When are we powerless over that? Before we drink or after? The allergy is after. So they're very clear about that. That's why the solution of that is don't have a drink. But that's not our solution.
It says over on the following page, all these and many others have one symptom in common. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. This phenomenon, as we have suggested, may be the manifestation of an allergy, which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. It has never been, by any treatment with which we are familiar, never been permanently eradicated. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence. So if the solution to this problem is entire abstinence, right? If the solution to the problem is just entire abstinence, our program of recovery would be this long, right? If put the plug in the jug worked, our program of recovery would be this long. You have an allergy, you can't control the amount you take once you put it in your body, so don't put it in your body, end of story, right?
Step one, don't do that. Step two, refer to step one. But then we hear people read that because they haven't gone through the rest of the book. They stop there and say, that's the solution. We don't drink no matter what. Anybody hear that?
So now we're starting to circle around this idea of actual powerlessness, right? On the previous page, it says men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. We don't have to explain that to anybody here, right?
Maybe if there's one person that don't understand it.
The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, they cannot after a time differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented unless they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort which comes at once by taking a few drinks.
That doesn't make you alcoholic, being irritable, restless, and discontented. What that means is you haven't found a solution for the human dilemma yet, where alcohol used to be the solution for that. Anybody?
Well, what they're describing is alcohol being the solution to that, right? What they're saying here is that it becomes elusive. And at some point in our drinking career, we start to admit that it's injurious, but we continue to do it. After they have succumbed to the desire again, as so many do, and the phenomenon of craving develops, they pass through the well-known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful, with a firm resolution not to drink again. This is repeated over and over, and unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there is very little hope of his recovery. We start to get different language now, right?
Who's making these observations? The doctor. And so what does over and over mean? Continues to happen, in spite of the fact that these people don't want to drink, right? They find themselves drinking again, right? Anybody like that here? Maybe one or two, right? And so what happens is, and so what we that don't understand it start implementing other ideas to bring about a solution than what the doctor says. He says the only solution for these certain types of people is what? An entire psychic change. Otherwise, the step one promise is they're going to drink again. That is the step one promise. How do you know what's the confirmation of step one is? You're having another drink. If you're powerless over something, a lot of people think it's after I do it. Well, if you're powerless after you do it, then you're not of our type. And the book talks about that. The R type that this guy's talking about here is, in spite of everything that's happened to them, in spite of them not wanting to do it again, they find themselves doing it again. And the only solution for these types that this book is designed for, of the first 100 men and women since thousands, what Alcoholics Anonymous was put together for, is people who cannot stay sober based on the information or the necessity or the wish or how great, right, the promises. Anybody ever make a promise here to somebody you're never going to do it again? Like a judge? Anybody? So people plays the thing, and you mean it. How many people would pass the lie detectors test here? Never doing it again. And then you exert your self-will, and now we could last longer in the fellowship. We could go longer in between drinks. We think the problem's solved when it's lying dormant, right? And so you notice he didn't say here the solution to our problems is page 417. Or 90 meetings in 90 days, or acceptance or surrender, or all these terms that we hear, they sound good. Wow, and if I could just do this, I'll be okay. Anybody, if I could just do this. And then anybody new, how many people's heard this, okay? How many people have been to a couple meetings here? How many people still here? Just starting to get that look. Remember when the TV 3 o'clock in the morning?
Oh, he asked us a question. What did he say?
What did he say? I'm still thinking about that drink. Okay, so the doctor talks about this shift that has to happen in a specific psychic changes. Later they'll expand on that as spiritual experience. I've never met one person, I've been in A's, including me, my 11 years of in and out, all the times coming back. My last reel I did 360 meetings in 90 days. I was in 412 and 12 studies, and I got a 3-month chip. And I gave the best Academy Award speech you ever wanted to hear. I'd like to thank me, and I'd like to thank me. Anybody? Right? And I put, and then an hour later I was drinking. Baffled. I came back to a meeting, and you know what I didn't say? What do I need to do? Right? I was just under the impression that I was going to die from this thing. I never went, oh my God, I think I need to do this course of action. I think I need a spiritual experience or psychic change in order to recover from it. Said nobody. Anybody over here, a new person coming back? I think I need a psychic change or spiritual experience. I can't wait. Where's the next big book study start?
Majority of us are looking for solutions to our consequences, right? In our minds, even as we're discussing them, I need a solution to this problem and that problem, my financial problem, my legal problem, my employment problem, my relationship problem. As long as I can get all of these things sorted out, somehow I'll be able to just stay sober based on my own accord.
So
right?
Then, yeah. So then he starts the problem, the inability to stay sober no matter the necessity or the wish, that these people keep returning to drink again. He gives the solution as the psychic change, and then what he witnessed afterwards, they're able to control their desire for, like, what's ever happening in their mind is not the same situation as before the psychic change. Right? There's still something happening, but not at the state of placing them beyond human aid. Then he gives 2 examples of people who were afflicted with his illness, one with grave emotional mental disorders, and one of the hopeless variety, which we'll understand as the real alcoholic. Both became sold on the ideas contained in this book, and he watched the miracle of Alcoholics Anonymous again unfold in their lives. Then he goes to Bill's story, and this is what I really like. Most people say, read Bill's story and try to find yourself in it. That is not the purpose of Bill's story.
I can tell you without any hesitation, that when somebody asked me to find myself in Bill's story, I immediately felt like I had absolutely nothing in common with a middle-aged white dude who had an affluent background in the 1930s, right? I was never going to find myself in that. But it makes sense that after the doctor's opinion, after the doctor's statements about alcoholism, that they would put together a chapter so we could see what these symptoms looked like in somebody's life, right? This inability to stay sober no matter how great the necessity or wish. Gaining self-knowledge about the disease of alcoholism wasn't powerful enough. Fear of what happened in the last relapse wasn't powerful enough. The threat of death, permanent commitment, the loss of family, the loss of the ability to make a living, the loss of all things human, not powerful enough to keep Bill sober, right? It wasn't until this message was carried to him, as Tony alluded to before, that something different was attempted, right?
So in how it works, it talks about what we were like, what happened, and what we're like now. It doesn't talk about what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now, right? It's not talking about our external circumstances in regards to our story. It's talking about the internal part of the inability to manage this problem that has us. Right, the inability to stay sober. What creates an unmanageable life is the inability to stay sober. Wouldn't that make your life unmanageable? If you're drinking the money instead of giving the rent money, wouldn't that make your life unmanageable? To have not to be able to pay your bills, wouldn't your life, all the problems pile up on you? And you come in here just kind of baffled at how your life got that way, one drink at a time. I wonder how it got like this. How many people here thought about fixing their life over a drink? There's something seriously wrong. I don't know what it is, but I got to figure something out here. Waiter. So the point of Bill's story is we're going to see what alcoholism looks like in somebody's life. Not only that, but the solution that he was offered, how he went through that solution, and what his life looked like afterwards. So in the beginning, which is really cool, you hear a lot of people say, the first half deals with step. Actually, it's an introduction to the whole thing. It's a summary of an overview of the whole thing. They're going to talk about the problem, the solution, and the course of action, and give us examples of that. They started us off with hope right from the first page, right? And so when they slap you around a bit with the problem, they say, well, wait a minute, now feel better. Are you feeling better now? We'll give you a bit of the solution. And Bill's story is going to be like that. So if you're looking for you in it, you're going to miss 90% of the story. And what that means is, imagine if you're an extra in a movie, right? And you went to hey, let's go to the movie. I'm in this movie. And you tell your friends, okay, we're going to the movie. And all you did in that whole movie is look for you in that one snippet of a shot. Would you miss the movie? Would your friends miss the movie? Welcome to the fellowship. No, did you say that out loud? Okay, so what happens is we're going to look at Bill's story and the unfolding of this thing, right? And so in Bill's story, we see that he struggled for a while. On page 5, liquor ceased to be a luxury. Yes, gradually things get worse, right? I woke up, right? Page 5, I woke up, this had to be stopped. Anybody? Now he's going to exert his self-will. Anybody here? This has to be stopped. 15 years old.
Is this the description of somebody who's still trying to control and enjoy his drinking? No, this had to be stopped, right? Bill is looking for a way to cease forever, right? Shortly afterward, I came home drunk.
See, he knew he could not take so much as one drink. But did that stop him from drinking?
No, over on page 7 it says, but it was not, for the frightful day when I drank once more. Right? The curve of my declining moral and bodily health fell off like a ski jump. After a time, I returned to the hospital. We're not talking about a guy who's just having too many Saturday nights.
So this is the second time going to treatment. One of the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous. So the things we tell people, if we told Bill that, would his story be different? If we told Bill, just don't drink, no matter what. Oh, Bill, you went to treatment. I guess you just don't want this. I guess you haven't learned your lesson yet. You haven't hit bottom. You haven't surrendered. You haven't had acceptance. Imagine telling that to Bill after the second time leaving treatment and his inability to stay sober. So what's missing from Bill's life is a solution sufficient enough for him to recover that's not him. Right? Because the first time he left treatment, which is interesting, Who did he think his solution can be? Himself. Surely this was the answer, self-knowledge. How many people? You hear it. As long as I don't take a drink, as long as I go to meetings, as long as I. Right? I did step one before you got here. No, impossible. You may have suffered from step one before you got here, but you need to learn what this thing is. So in treatment, he learned what it was, and the confusion with Bill was because he didn't have good sponsorship available to him, honestly. So there was no one to check his thinking with, because if I was sponsoring you and you told me this was the answer, self-knowledge, I would say, you're missing the understanding of step one. Let's go over it again. I'd hear how you shared in a meeting, and that would tell me whether you had the step one experience or not. So this is interesting. If we did a survey, has Bill had the step one experience yet? How many people don't want to participate? I know that, look, I'm not saying nothing, he's being tricky. So most people think because Bill went to treatment, he has actually had the step one experience. No, what he's had is he's admitted he has a problem, but not a problem that he can't look after. 90% of the people who come into our fellowship admit they have a problem, but not a problem that they can't look after. They formulate their own program of recovery. They get the Burger King drive-through style happening. Well, I'll have a bit of acceptance, I'll do page 417, I'll ask for help in the morning, I'll give thanks at night, all good stuff, but that's not our solution, right? There's a specific course of action. So his plan of attack fails. He's unsuccessful in his approach, but he thought he had this thing. Yes, how many people? He had this thing. If you ask Bill, you think you're going to drink again? Never again. Surely this was the answer, self-knowledge. Then he drank again and ended up in treatment. The second time, what's good about the second time is Bill actually has what we call is the step one experience that the book breaks us through. That's our job, is to help sponsees. Most of you have probably been through this. Very new people who find this appealing, unless you got dragged here or tricked. Right? I don't need to go to that. Any woman will be there? No. So what happens is his train of thinking gets altered the second time in treatment. The second time in treatment, he has a step one experience. And what the step one experience is broken up all the way through the book. It's so subtle. And our job when working with new people is not to get them to admit they have a problem, but to help them have a step one experience. Anybody know what the difference is? We'll explain it. The second time in treatment is so worthwhile. Go ahead.
We're on page 9?
Yep.
Where do you want to start from?
Oh, so on page 8, sorry, 7, he went to the hospital, right? This is worth reading. So he thinks self-knowledge is the answer, right? I made a little money, surely this was self-knowledge. Everybody's getting sober, life's getting good. Anybody? Talking about all the promises coming true, look how great I'm doing, look, I got the girlfriend back, the house is back, guess who's ready to come back, right? So it's kind of like he's feeling really good about his life in sobriety, is he not? He's making money, surely this is the answer, staying on guard, blah, blah. So, but it was not. Yeah.
But it was not, for the frightful day came when I drank once more. The curve of my declining moral and bodily health fell off like a ski jump. After a time, I returned to the hospital. This was the finish, the curtain, it seemed to me. My weary and despairing wife was informed it would all end with heart failure during delirium tremens, or I would develop a wet brain perhaps within a year. She would soon have to give me over to the undertaker or the asylum. They did not have to tell me. I knew and almost welcomed the idea. It was a devastating blow to my pride. I, who had thought so well of myself and my abilities, of my capacities to surmount obstacles, was cornered at last. Now, I was to plunge into the dark, joining that endless procession of sots who had gone on before. I thought of my poor wife. There had been much happiness after all. I'm sure Lois might have had a different way of describing that. What would I not give to make amends? But that was over now. No words can tell of the loneliness and despair I found in that bitter morass of self-pity. Quicksand stretched all around me in all directions. I had met my match. I had been overwhelmed. Alcohol was my master. I often think about people who spring into a meeting, smile across their face, looking I did step 1 with my sponsor. And I'm thinking, you have not done step 1, if that's how you're feeling about it, right? And this is what we're talking about the step 1 experience, is getting to that place where we can see that these symptoms apply to our lives. We look back through our lives, our inability to stop, no matter how great the necessity or wish, no matter how great the necessity or wish. All the reasons are there to stop doing this, and they're of absolutely no avail. Think about what that does to a human being, right? This repeated attempt to stay away from that first drink and the utter inability to do so.
So we could see the shift in his thinking is before he had the problem. He had it. Now it has him. Big difference between being in a headlock and having somebody in a headlock. Big difference. So he's saying, my God, this thing has me. I don't have it. It shifts our thinking. Most of us think, I have it, and this is everything I'm doing to combat it. He realizes his fate now is he can't do nothing about it. He's going to die an alcoholic death.
He has resigned himself to that idea. There is no more obsessing about how to stay away, right? None of that is happening. He's resigned himself to the idea that alcohol is his master and there's absolutely nothing he can do about it, and this is how he's going to die.
Would his experience be the same if he was just coming to the fellowship today? 100%. He'd be going to meetings. He'd thinking he had this thing. He'd acquire self-knowledge. He'd acquire support. He'd do a check-in. I'm doing good. I don't even think about it. The obsession is left. I'm doing fantastic. Not a cloud on the horizon. Everybody around me is feeling good about my sobriety. Hell, I'm feeling good about my sobriety. Things are great. Well, what did you do different? Nothing. Just went to meetings. And then he relapsed. You think he was baffled at the fact that he ended up in treatment again? Now what's missing from his life is a solution sufficient enough for him to have a change as acquired by what the doctor talked about. It's missing. So what he's going to try to do is exert his self-will more, which if he was in meetings, he'd maybe go a little longer because you're trying harder this time, right? Get some chips, get support system happening and checking in, doing all this, maybe treatment, recovery, help, doing all these things, what he feels is necessary for him to have a different experience, but now he knows the inevitable is coming. He's going to drink again. That's step 1. Knowing without a shadow of a doubt, my fate is I'm going to find myself with a drink in my hand, and I'm the only one that don't know when it's going to happen. Now who has this thing? This thing has me. Right? So the third time in treatment, then what's the difference? The first 2 times, first time he had it going on, second time he's...
Fear.
Right? Fear, sobered him for a while. And then he talks about the insidious insanity returning. He knows why he's drinking again, because this insanity, he's drinking against his own will. He's not planning it. He's not thinking about it. He's not fantasizing about it. This thing has him with drink in hand again. He's baffled why this is happening all the time. Anybody baffled here? So we see in Bill's story, he's describing alcoholism. So the third time in treatment, which is interesting, is I guess, you know what, we're just going to go through the steps as what happened with Bill. So, and the rest of the book's designed to reiterate that, right? So what's missing from Bill's life? Is a solution sufficient enough for him to have this spiritual experience or psychic change? Yes, a change sufficient enough for him to recover.
In more plain language, something more powerful than his alcoholism is missing, right? Every solution he's tried to apply to it has not been powerful enough to overcome it up until this point.
So which is now in step 2, which is interesting, is a kind of breakdown, is one of his friends had an experience.
One of his drinking buddies had an experience.
Right? That he kind of got alleviated from life sentence or something, a jail sentence. That some people approached him with a solution, he put in his life, he had a profound experience. He phoned Bill, Bill didn't phone him, which is interesting. And he got on a train to go visit Bill while Bill was sitting at the kitchen table drinking. So So you picture that, out of treatment, he's sitting there drinking, maybe his fingers are yellow, remember those old tables with the aluminum around it, and those chairs, and he's sitting there, and the smell of the room, right? He's sitting there, like just like happy. He has enough booze, cigarettes, like his wife's at work, right? He's doing great. And his friend calls, and then he shows up at the door. What was the first thing he noticed about his friend?
There was something about his eyes. He was inexplicably different. What had happened?
So which is really cool is his friend's not explaining how much he's changed. You know, like most newcomers here, you got 5 minutes, let me tell you how much I changed. Oh, wow, that's great. Good, you got $20? No, you know, it's kind of like, we go around trying to convince people how much we changed, and they're saying when we change, they'll see it.
In a few seconds on Bill's front doorstep, through the haze of gin that he's been sitting and drinking, he can immediately see something different about his friend. His friend doesn't need to convince him. Bill can immediately see it.
So here we go. So he's sitting with his friend, and he talks about he's come to pass along his experience. His experience. So what we understand is his friend Ebby is doing a 12-step call, right? What step is he talking to Bill about? I like that sound. How many people have an opinion? No. So what he's actually doing is the essence of this thing is once we've had a spiritual experience, what's our job is to carry this message, right? So when you're working with a new person, first you vet them, right? You do help them have the step one experience. They'll match your mental inconsistencies with your own. You'll get identification that you're both on the same playing field. Yeah, you have the same illness that I have.
These
right?
are the symptoms. Do they apply to your life, right?
Or if you're in NA, then you could direct them to NA or GA or something different. If they have a different problem than you, then there's other fellowships where they'll get the help they need. Does that kind of make sense? So Ebby is there to pass his experience on, which would be step 12, but he's talking to Bill about step 2. He's talking to Bill about what he did to have this experience. So was this the solution to step 1? Yes?
Bill says that he decided that his gin would last longer than his preaching, but he did no ranting. In a matter-of-fact way, he told how 2 men had appeared in court persuading the judge to suspend his commitment. They had told of a simple religious idea and a practical program of action. That was 2 months ago, and the result was self-evident. It worked. He had come to pass his experience along to me, if I cared to have it. I was shocked but interested. Certainly I was interested. I had to be, for I was hopeless.
So which is cool is Bill seeing this thing in his friend's life that he's not been able to obtain through all the stuff that he's done. And he talks about his ideas of miracles were revised right then and there. He's seen that his friend was inwardly rearranged. So his friend doing a 12-step call is talking to Bill about step 2, and Bill's mind is starting to shift about the idea that maybe there is a solution for me. Maybe if I did what his friend did, I'd get what he got. But he's still arguing it within his own mind what he thinks that solution is. Yes? So how successful would Bill be with his own thinking? He wouldn't be. So part of a sponsor's job or a person is sponsoring is to navigate them through their own thinking to get to a starting place.
Which is exactly what Ebby does. My friend suggested what then seemed a novel idea. He said, why don't you
Page
choose
12.
your own conception of God? That statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning. Over on page 13, it says, at the hospital I was separated from alcohol for the last time. Treatment seemed wise, for I showed signs of delirium tremens.
What he talks about here is worth reading again. I saw that growth could start from that point. Upon a foundation of complete willingness, I might build what I saw in my friend. Would I have it? Of course I would. So that means when Ebby talked to him about his experience, and he explained it in such a way that Bill seen it was obtainable, if he did the same thing he did, that he would have the same experience, right? So he's just done step 1, and He reconfirmed that there was no more power in him, as they were both of the same type. Yes, sitting at the kitchen table. What was he doing? Drinking. And then he's sitting there and he's seen that this solution, if it worked for him, it might be possible for him if he did what he did. If you want what we have and are willing to go to any lengths again, then you're ready to take certain steps. He has the information of step 1 and the information of step 2, right? And he's sitting at the kitchen table doing what? Drinking. And then he says, what I have at a course. So he made a decision to pursue the same course of action that his friend did, right? And then he went to treatment for the 3rd time. So based on why was he going to treatment for the 3rd time? Because he's seen if he did what his friend did, he would get what he got. Does that kind of make sense?
Armed with the facts about the problem, armed with what a solution could look like in another person, there I humbly offered myself to God, as I then understood him to do with me as he would. I placed myself unreservedly under his care and direction. I admitted for the first time that of myself I was nothing, that without him I was lost. What step is that? Bill's made a decision, right? He's now made a decision armed with the proper facts about his problem, armed with the facts about a solution in another person. He's made a decision to go through this course of action. That's step 3. I ruthlessly faced my sins and became willing to have my newfound friend take them away, root and branch. I have not had a drink since.
So we've seen, since his decision, yes, I want what you got, what confirmed that was a course of action. If he never followed through, sitting at the kitchen table when he did step 3, yes, I want what you got, his decision to do that, and he never pursued that, that would have been his decision. It would have confirmed his not wanting this. Does that make sense?
But what confirms his decision here is that he ruthlessly faced his sins and became willing, right? My schoolmate visited me and I fully acquainted him with my problems and deficiencies. Which step is that? We made a list of people I had hurt or toward whom I had felt resentment. I expressed my entire willingness to approach these individuals admitting my wrong. Never was I to be critical of them. I was to write all such matters to the utmost of my ability.
We made a list. He wasn't going through this alone. So the difference the 3rd time in treatment, somebody was walking him through a course of action sufficient enough to bring about a different result that he witnessed in his friend. The recipe of Alcoholics Anonymous was being presented as something that the doctor witnessed, that there's something here, that these guys have something. So as Bill was doing the same recipe that Abby did, that was passed on to him by his friends, this concession, right, of series of experiences through a course of action, we start seeing something unfolding here. Right, so whose recipe is he doing this time? The treatment centers or Abby's experience?
He's certainly not doing his own recipe anymore, correct? Right?
Burger King has left the building. No, so.
I was to test my thinking by the new God consciousness within. Common sense would thus become uncommon sense, meaning a new sense, right? His own common sense was no longer applicable. It always took him where? Back to that first drink. That was the reality of step 1. I was to sit quietly when in doubt, asking only for direction and strength, to meet my problems as he would have me. Never was I to pray for myself, except as my requests bore on my usefulness to others. Then only might I expect to receive, but that would be in great measure.
My friend promised when these things were done, I would enter upon a relationship with my Creator. That's the whole purpose of this thing, is for you to have your own experience where you're in connection, right, with this entity, power, life source that you're now in counsel with. Who was he in counsel with before this?
Himself.
Yeah,
right?
and who did he care about?
Himself.
His friend came to help him and he pushed a drink his way. Like, hey, good to see you. I'm glad you're sober. You want a drink?
I don't care that you've been sober for 2 months. Drink with me, right?
Right.
We can probably end it there and then carry on this afternoon.
No, we go to 12.
Are we going to 12? Okay.
Why, you going somewhere? You got something to do?
Well, yeah.
We're just getting started.
All right, we're just getting fired up.
So we see just that short period of time, it created a shift sufficient enough that he was now in counsel with something greater than himself. He's having his own experience with this, which is pretty wild, and he's still in treatment by going through this course of action.
My friend promised when these things were done, I would enter upon a new relationship with my Creator, that I would have the elements of a way of living which answered all my problems. Belief in the power of God, plus enough willingness, honesty, and humility to establish and maintain the new order of things were the essential requirements. Simple, but not easy. A price had to be paid. It meant destruction of self-centeredness. I must turn in all things to the Father of light who presides over us all.
Yeah, what do you call it? The secondary is the experience you have when it happens. Is like if we started talking about the type of phone I have, not everybody has the same type of phone, yes? All different types. That's secondary, what I call it. But can it perform everything I need it to do? Am I hooked up with a provider? Am I hooked up with, do I have a sufficient enough plan that enable me to do everything I need it to do, right? To keep me connected with loved ones, to go through life, right? Have my daily planning, everything I need to do. Most phones can do the same thing. So are you hooked up with a provider? Yeah, oh, I got a battery in here, but are you hooked up? You need to be hooked up. You could have, everybody could have a phone, but unless you're hooked up to a provider. But you ever notice that all phones have the 911 frequency? That's a newcomer phone. Not hooked up with anything, but everything's emergency. Sorry. So we have a new data plan for you, right? And it's not that expensive, but a price has to be paid, right? When you get that data plan, then you're kind of amazed. How many people got some talk about their data plan, what their phone can do and how great it is and things are wonderful, right? But you can't have that experience with the phone still in the box. You need to have that for your own self. As you go through, you kind of go, wow, this is wow. And then you hit certain things that, like, I don't understand, so I'll find, so, hey, have these certain applications or principles that don't seem to be working here. Someone, here, I'll help you with that. They'll give you their experience with this thing. That's what this is kind of saying in a way that we can understand it. So what we're experiencing, what they're talking about, has been happening since the beginning of time. They've taken that same principles and put it into a phone system. It may sound kind of weird, but it's kind of like that, right? And as long as I keep my plan going, I get to utilize my phone and everything's good. If I went like this with my phone and made a connection thing, how many people would understand what I'm talking about? I need
Power.
Right? And that's kind of like what this is getting at. Without power, I can't utilize any of it. So he makes this acknowledgement that the first thing that he's tapped into is this experience within inside of himself. That's the first thing he got, and that's the purpose of this whole thing, is for you to have the beginning of the experience that we have, right? Which is pretty cool. So the confirmation, if we kind of go back here real fast before we get to the next part, if you go back to how it works, it talks about step one, we've covered that. What's the confirmation of step one? Is another drink, right? So what's the confirmation of the idea presented in step two? A lot of people think it's finding God. That's not it. Step two is an outlay of the solution that I need to apply to my life in order to have this experience.
Saying here it was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself, right? Based on the evidence presented to me by this person completing a 12-step principle, right? I become willing to believe. Has this experience happened in step two? Have I made this connection in step two? Right? It dispels some of the stuff we hear in meetings commonly, that I do steps 1, 2, and 3 every day, right? To me, when you say I do steps 1, 2, and 3 every day, what you're saying to me is you're still in collision with another drink in step 1, right? You're still kind of lingering around a willingness to believe in a power greater than yourself. And really, you haven't made a decision in step 3 to go through the rest of the course of action.
So really, you've done nothing, but you feel good about that. I've discussed the problem. I know there's a solution, and I'm really not willing to commit yet. I do step 1, 2, and 3 every day. So the confirmation here, step 1, is another drink, because they explained why that is. The confirmation of step 2 is step 12. They give you an outlay of what the solution is in the course of action that they took. Ebby sitting at the kitchen table with his friend, talked about the course of action he took to have this experience, yes? So Bill's understanding what that course of action is, which is step 2, is the solution to the problem. He's seen that it was possible for him to have that relationship or this experience. So having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps. What steps? The steps that were discussed in step 2. Yes? So step 3 is an idea that this relationship might be possible, that I could experience the same experience that you're having, but it's just an idea for me. It may feel good. It's like the idea of, wow, she's pretty. She gave me her phone number, but I don't know if it's the correct phone number or not.
Probably not.
Probably not. But it doesn't stop me from having a good feeling, right? It's like walking around, Mr. Bean, right? But I haven't phoned it yet, right? And that's like step 3, makes you feel good, but nothing really happening yet. And here he's saying, as the result of the pursuit of his decision, he's now living in 11. The confirmation of the idea in step 3 is the experience presented in step 11. He's now in harmony, relationship. When you get into the steps in the book, the only step that gives us a daily living plan is step 11. It's the only step they talk about as that we should be incorporating in our life on a daily basis. No other step talks about working every day. And there's nowhere in our book talks about working the steps. Nowhere. That's treatment center ideas brought in here. I'm working this, I'm doing that, God's working with me. Oh, that is not something. Not I'm working with God, right? You ever hear that? God's working with me. Damn, I got to get closer to you. So the confirmation of step 3 is step 11. In Bill's story here, we see this relationship taking place. It's the most important factor of his experience. Then, because of this experience that happened as the result of these steps, what happens while he's in treatment? He's lying there thinking about what? What's the confirmation of this change?
My friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all of my affairs.
Not these steps. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry, my apologies. The paragraph ahead of that on page 14. While I lay in the hospital, the thought came that there were thousands of hopeless alcoholics who might be glad to have what had been so freely given to me. Think about that for a moment. We read line by line through Bill's story. What is the common theme other than step 1 through Bill's story? The constant thought of self, right? He makes some sort of small remarks about how his wife might be feeling or how others might be feeling around him. But the majority of the story is about how he's feeling, right? His experience, what he's going to apply in order to solve his problem, how he's going to fix whatever needs to happen next.
I have
right?
a friend in Montreal that I'm entitled to some of his money. Remember in the story? I have a friend in Montreal. He still has some money, which translates to, I'm entitled to that. I think I'll go collect what he has owing me. Anybody? Come on. That person still has a spare room.
This is the first time in his story where he considers somebody else, right? This experience that he's had is so profound. In the paragraphs preceding this, he has to phone his doctor to make sure he hasn't had some sort of mental breakdown, right? Because the peace and the contentment that he's feeling is very odd, right? It's a little concerning to him. And his doctor said, I don't know what's happened to you, but you better hang on to it. Right?
Imagine being alarmed because you experience a sense of peace and ease and comfort.
Without taking a few drinks.
And it alarms you. How you feeling? I don't know, I'm feeling really good.
I don't know what's wrong. I gotta figure this out, right?
I'm thinking about somebody else. Oh my God. And you phone your psychiatrist, thinking about helping other people. Something wrong here, right? Which is for us, that's profound, right? We think we've done service by putting away our own chair. Talk about it for a week. I put away I do service, I go speak at my meeting every day. Whether they ask me to or not. Sorry. Stop me anytime now. Come on, reel it in.
Land the plane. Most importantly, though, it's not something that he's conjured, right? He didn't have to conjure this on his own. He's not conjuring his own serenity. He's not conjuring his own peace, right? I need to do something in order to make myself serene and peaceful and in constant thought of others.
Byproduct.
Right? He's gone through this course of action, and this is the result he is experiencing. Those are two different things, right? I could help some of them. They, in turn, might work with others. My friend had emphasized the absolute necessity of demonstrating these principles in all my affairs. Particularly was it imperative to work with others as he had worked with me. Faith without works was dead. What does that statement mean, right? Like we're laughing and joking about the idea that putting away our own chairs is sufficient enough amount of service, but that statement that faith without works is a powerful one if we consider it for a moment. I mean, many of us might have had religious ideas, belonged to religious organizations before we came to Alcoholics Anonymous, but they didn't spell the necessary change, right? We still continued to drink despite these beliefs that we had. Because faith in and of itself is nothing unless it's followed up with action, right? And what he's talking about here is the action of ensuring that all who suffer from this thing have access to it. How do we make that happen? Faith without works was dead, he said, and how appallingly true for the alcoholic. For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead.
So which is cool is now he has a solution for this human dilemma and perplexities. He doesn't have a solution for alcoholism. He has a solution for him that he's applying these principles to for a different experience, right? And what's really cool here is he keeps on referencing his friend. He didn't say, I came up with these ideas. I was sitting in a meeting and this is what makes sense to me, or for me, recovery. He's saying, I'm doing what my friend showed me to do, and I'm doing what he said to do, which would be sponsorship. And the conclusion of that is a couple things. One, he has the same experience that his friend's having, yes? And he has the same ideas of helping other people that his friend had. And that is the beginning and the design of Alcoholics Anonymous. So, how your home group is in regards to this message and traditions is directly proportionate to sponsorship. If your group sucks, well, it's a direct result of you. How do you feel about that? Because it's not AA back then, it's not AA in the future. We are Alcoholics Anonymous. We are Alcoholics Anonymous today. That's all we got. And how it looks is directly proportionate to our understanding, our involvement, and the message we carry.
How much service do we do in the aid of our common welfare? Is our service for our own singular individual welfare, or is it for the welfare of the group? For if an alcoholic failed to perfect and enlarge his spiritual life through work and self-sacrifice for others, he could not survive the certain trials and low spots ahead. If he did not work, he would surely drink again. And if he drank, he would surely die. Then faith would be dead indeed. With us, it's just like that. My wife and I abandoned ourselves with enthusiasm to the idea of helping other alcoholics to a solution of their problems. It was fortunate, for my old business associates remained skeptical for a year and a half, during which I found little work.
Year and a half, we complain after 2 weeks, they're still treating me the same. Well, you haven't paid them back the money yet. What does that got to do with it? Right? Did you give them back their car yet? No, I still need it.
I was not too well at the time and was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment. This sometimes nearly drove me back to drink.
Is that alcoholism or the human condition? It's the human condition. Because if he was still suffering from alcoholism, what would he be doing in these situations? He'd be drinking.
Interestingly enough, the perspective in new sobriety is that things need to improve immediately, right? In order for us to be okay, our external circumstances need to improve immediately. And what Bill is describing here is that for the first couple of years he was sober, it was very difficult to make a living. He was plagued by bouts of fear and self-pity and resentment, right? He goes on to say, many times I have gone but I soon found that when all other measures failed, work with another alcoholic would save the day. Many times I have gone to my old hospital in despair. On talking to a man there, I would be amazingly lifted up and set on my feet. It is a design for living that works in rough going. How many people in the room have been sober more than 5 years? I've talked to some of you this weekend, right? There is a difference between somebody who is actively working with others and in service to our common welfare to those who are a bit drifting, right? There is a happiness and a contentment amongst those who are in constant thought of others. And those of us who have drifted into a place where perhaps maybe we've lost the idea of this, right? And the idea for new people in new sobriety is that your external circumstances do not need to be perfect in order to have this shift, right? To have this internal peace and contentment that he talks about, that in amongst the ability to make a living, in amongst the inability to recreate his external life in any way that he thought might, be beneficial, he was still staying sober, right? And that work with another alcoholic was the principle that saved the day.
The demonstration, not the perfection. So regardless of what his thinking was telling him, he went with what his sponsor or his friend told him to do. I don't see how this is going to work. Go try it and let us know. Damn, this seems to be working. So we see before the third time in treatment how plagued was Bill with his own thinking and life, circumstances. And inevitably he found himself drinking all the time. He didn't have the recipe, the spiritual recipe sufficient enough to bring about a change. Yeah. So the third time in treatment, he went through this where the change that the Dr. Silkworth talked about, that's why they use this as an example, was a change in his thinking in regards to the illness. That component was removed, and he was left with all the wreckage and his thinking and his life, and he was left with him.
If you think about these two paragraphs here, the one that I just read on page 15, and compare it against the one that he disclosed on page 13, I was not too well at the time and was plagued by waves of self-pity and resentment.
Where's that all happening?
On page 13, he says, I was to test my thinking by the new God consciousness within. Common sense would thus become uncommon sense. I was to sit quietly when in doubt, asking only for direction and strength to meet my problems as he would have me. In those waves of self-pity and resentment, this is what he is doing that is different, right? Seeking counsel was something other than his own ability to think.
And going to go help somebody. Beforehand, when we had a problem, how many people would go home, look at the phone ringing, don't answer it, and really enjoy where you're at? And then when you're really enjoying your depression, what do you got to do? You got to get horizontal. You got to lie down on top of the light. Phone rings, you look at it. No, right? Come on. How many people has looked at their phone and God's trying to intervene and said, I'm not participating? Are you going to your home group tonight? No, I'm really working on my depression. Are you going to go help somebody half an hour before the meeting? No, they might ask me to do something. Are you participating in your roundup? No, that's for people who are grateful. But it's not. It's for people who are looking for a different experience. Common sense would become uncommon sense. What do you mean? Go find somebody in a worse predicament than me? Nobody's in a worse predicament than me. What you're complaining about, somebody else is hoping for. We forget that.
The life that you have today, somebody is currently praying for, right? And we have this kind of common theme throughout the book, which we refer to as the recipe, right? Is to acknowledge that these things are happening upstairs in the current moment, right? This self-pity, this resentment, this sort of depressive state. Acknowledge it. Call it what it is, right? Pray about it, right? Keep in counsel with something other than yourself. And then redirect this energy towards somebody that can be helped. Right?
1934, he's having this experience. We're in 2023. The only thing that's changed is the people who present it. Those who have experienced it, it's the same thing happening today that was happening back then, that's available just as much today as back then. The only thing is changing in our fellowship is sponsorship. And us making other people more responsible for what we need to be responsible about. when we complain about the fellowship. So what we did is the same thing Bill did, right? We went out and started the home group nobody was staying sober in it. It was a den of predators in there. It was not a safe place to be. And so when a responsible member showed up there, they prayed about it and said, what am I going to do? Am I going to work the serenity prayer? Am I going to work toward the change of this thing? Or am I going to leave it the way it is and go somewhere else? So in prayer it says, participate in a change. So how would you change a community or a fellowship or an area that has become toxic, where the inmates are running the asylum? Right? Because, come on, how many people have been to a meeting and say, oh my God, what's going on in there? Right? And so what happens is you start with one person at a time. Start taking one person through the book. Then you get 2 people. You take those 3 people and you start a little group. And people will actually sit out that group and say, don't go in there. Stay away from those people. Stay away from that group. And then what happens, God don't hear that. And he starts qualifying the called, meaning we start taking back the fellowship by carrying this message, and pretty soon that group did a 160-degree turn, is now living the traditions. Everybody's in service. We're getting like 20 people showing up at the business meeting where before there was none. How did that all start? The same way it happened here. One person talking to another person that they seen it was possible for them to have this experience. When you have this experience, you cannot hide it. Something happens from the inside out. You can't hide it. You get involved in a level that's beyond anything. So this last paragraph, how he closes here, is pretty amazing stuff. And the rest of the book is going to, again, expand on what, so you see the expansion happening here, right? It started with an idea, right? And then it started with like the experience of who's putting this together, then the doctor's opinion, an example of Bill's story, and then now the book's going to start breaking up Bill's story and explaining it in more depth. Like it's an expansion. It's pretty wild. I get excited about this stuff. It's good. Don't stop me. Go ahead.
An alcoholic in his cups is an unlovely creature. Our struggles with him are variously strenuous, comic, and tragic. One poor chap committed suicide in my home. He could not or would not see our way of life. There is, however, a vast amount of fun about it. I suppose some would be shocked at our seemingly worldliness and levity, but just underneath there is a deadly earnestness. Faith has to work 24 hours a day, in and through us, or we perish. Most of us feel we need look no further for utopia.
That's a great word to look up, utopia. It's pretty wild.
We have it with us right here and now. Each day, my friend's simple talk in our kitchen multiplies itself in a widening circle of peace on earth and goodwill toward men.
So what's really wild is when you get into studies and you get into people who've been through this, it took me a while. The first while going through studies like this, I went with what other people taught me, right? Like I went with their teaching, and then when I investigated a bit more, I realized, well, that was just a generic approach. Like if you go into this deeper, and it started to debunk a lot of the stuff I used to hear. Like you hear people say, read Bill's story, try to find yourself. How many people has heard that? So you think that's the purpose of Bill's story, but then it'll tell you the purpose of Bill's story. The book always, it never leaves you kind of, I wonder what that was. It recloses, it reloops, it revisits it. Purpose of what you just read. So the first paragraph on There Is a Solution will tell us the purpose of Bill's story. How many people find that interesting? Let's see if you've heard this before. The first paragraph, and then we'll close with that idea.
Chapter 2, There Is a Solution, on page 17. We of Alcoholics Anonymous know thousands of men and women who were once just as hopeless as Bill.
We've gone from 100 to thousands now.
Nearly all have recovered. They have solved the drink problem. We are average Americans. All sections of this country and many of its occupations are represented, as well as many political, economic, social, and religious backgrounds. We are people who normally would not mix.
And see, it all depends how well you are, but I thought, I didn't mix either. they're talking about hanging around with each other. I don't mix. So you got to remember, some of us are
Oh, now I've lost my place. We are people who would normally not mix, but there exists among us a fellowship, a friendliness, and an understanding which is indescribably wonderful, We are like the passengers of a great liner the moment after rescue from shipwreck, when camaraderie, joyousness, and democracy pervade the vessel from steerage to captain's table. Unlike the feelings of the ship's passengers, however, our joy in escape from disaster does not subside as we go our individual ways. The feeling of having shared in a common peril is one element in the powerful cement which binds us. But that in itself would never have held us together as we are now joined.
Which is the problem, step one. That don't hold us together. What holds us together then?
The tremendous fact for every one of us is that we have discovered a common solution. We have a way out on which we can absolutely agree, and upon which we can join in brotherly and harmonious action. This is the great news this book carries to those who suffer from alcoholism.
And here's something to think about for the next meeting. We're going to get into this a little more depth. So, is the solution of your understanding or our understanding? Is the solution a collective understanding or a singular? Is the solution that you need to go find or we're presenting? We'll close with Trinity prayer.
Please, if you guys have any questions whatsoever, and I chatted with a couple of people last night that felt like they couldn't ask particular questions, either in sponsorship relationships or in their home groups, this is a place to do that. So write them down, put them in the basket. You don't need to attach your name to it. We are more than happy to answer them this afternoon.
And the most common one is, no, we're not unsupervised. What's the foundation for a great life?
God. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
Remember, if you didn't like anything that was said, see Joanne. Right on. Recovered alcoholic. My name's Tony. Sobriety date's April 8, 1989. Nothing has changed since the last workshop, which is always a good thing, right? And have you changed any?
No, not even when you sabotaged my microphone.
And who are you again?
My name is Joanne. I'm also a recovered alcoholic. My sobriety date is August 24th, 2014.
And that's good. When you do two workshops like this, the problem is when you spread them out a bit, those who agree with you move forward, and those who disagree with you leave. So, and that's the beauty of these workshops, is to create conversation, right? Because if you leave here with the same understanding you came here with, then it's a crappy roundup and it's a crappy study. It's a challenging of the idea of what could I do better, what information am I missing, or how could I better sponsor people, or maybe I need to engage in something a little different to have a different experience than what I'm doing, right? And what is the collective understanding of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? So we already established that the fellowship took its name from the basic text. And we already established that this is the common understanding, collective experience, right? And since thousands have gone through it. So this is the basic text of Alcoholics Anonymous. This is what they all agree on, right? And they went to great lengths to put this together. The wording, the understanding, the kind of how to best explain something that's unexplainable. And then you get a lot of people go, oh, well, this thing over here says this and that says that. Well, that's their understanding, how they explain something. And they're entitled to explain it as they see it or the wording. But collectively, this is the understanding of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's what we try to stick to here. So did you want to add anything?
No, just that we spent the morning portion kind of going heavily through step one, right? Those symptoms that define us or separate us as a distinct entity, right? The clear understanding that the alcoholic is just as bodily different from his fellows as we might be mentally, right? That doctor's opinion based on that allergy, that phenomenon of craving, that inability to control the amount we take once we get started. And then the doctor states that this desperate attempt to the first drink is repeated over and over again, and unless this person can experience this entire psychic change, there is very little hope of his recovery. And as we go through Bill's story, we break down what those symptoms look like in a person's life, actively in a person's life, and the course of action he went through in order to experience a change he had never experienced before. And we left off at the beginning of there is a solution, and now we think it might be beneficial to sort of take a heavier look at that second symptom, right? So we're going to start off on page 22.
And I'll hit two highlights. On page 18, they talk about, but the ex-problem drinker who has found this solution, not a solution, this solution, who is properly armed with facts about himself, can generally win the entire confidence of another alcoholic in a few hours. See the window there? Same with Bill and Abby. It's kind of interesting, right? Until such an understanding is reached, little or nothing can be accomplished. That means they're the only ones that don't know their story's not changing. They're hoping that their story will change, but inevitably, if they're of this type that we're going to get into, they'll find themselves drinking again and kind of baffled. And then on the next page, they talk about on page 19, which is the essence of this thing. So it's not like a lottery. We didn't get like randomly selected out of the life lottery to be here, right? Or we're the lucky ones. Oh, there was a process put involved. Usually people involved in our lives or the direction or we ended up here through circumstances or through some cosmic intervention, right? A lot of us. So they talk about here, right? They talk about many are dropping into oblivion every day. Even within our own fellowship, there are a lot of people dying of alcoholism in AA. Of all places to be dying of alcoholism within a fellowship that's designed to help alcoholics. But if you're not properly armed with facts about yourself, right, and you don't know what's going on because your recovery isn't based on anything other than your own thinking, right, then how are you going to help an actual alcoholic that needs a specific solution to a specific problem?
Bill's story and our coverage of it, this morning, early this afternoon, is a good example of that, right? How many attempts Bill had made in order to combat his own alcoholism, right? It wasn't until he was approached by someone for whom the problem had been solved, right? It carried a message of depth and weight that got his attention, right? The consequences had been getting Bill's attention for most of his life. It wasn't enough, it wasn't powerful enough to combat what he was up against. But when he was approached by somebody who knew and understood what he was up against, and knew and understood that solution needed to be more powerful than the problem, right? This is when change happened.
And they keep on talking about, like, we're going to hit some highlights. They talk about a demonstration of these principles, an idea that we're working toward. So this is the difference in our fellowship. So how many people have been around a while? Right? How many people are relatively new in your first 5 years? Right? So one of the things that the misconception that we've placed on new people is that you need to find this thing. Right? And it's not your job to find this thing. But there are more of you who haven't done this than there are those of us who have. Right? And what makes you say that? I go to a lot of meetings and I work with thousands of people since 1989. Right? Thousands, huge workshops, and it's really interesting, the shift in understanding once we start getting back to the basic literature. So the idea of people coming to our fellowship and being in meetings is the answer to alcoholism is a misconception. It's like sitting in emergency. Just because you're there, you may feel better, but you need to see somebody to let them know you're there. Right? I made it, right? Right? So they say here, you got to look at the wording. My sponsor taught me that, right? As many could recover if they had the opportunity we have enjoyed. How shall then we present which was so freely given to us? I mean, it's our responsibility to carry this message, to seek out and find these people within our own fellowship who are dying of alcoholism, because they're the only ones that don't know they're dying of alcoholism. Right? I had no idea what I was up against till I got 12-stepped into this thing and I got walked through it. Bill had no idea, Joanne. Like, that seems to be the common thread. Until somebody approached me with whom the problem had been solved, right? Approached me because they seen I was dying from this thing and started walking me through. They never asked my permission. Like, as soon as a person ends up in AA, they give consent. And what's the first sign of sponsorship? Anybody know what the first sign of sponsorship is? When they leave the meeting thinking about you instead of thinking about themselves. Can't believe what that person said. I sponsor a lot of people. Okay, so there's the idea that we're presenting. So Then, which is really interesting, they get into all the different types of people. I add this part, that are in our fellowship. What's the only requirement for AA membership? What's the biggest 12-step fellowship there is? If you were a part of other fellowships that you weren't getting support in, where would be a good place to go hang out? Hey, if you were single and looking for a non-drinker, would it be a good place to go hang out? Oh, no, sorry. So I'm looking, like a lot of people come in here look for relationships, and come on. No, not yet, eh? You're hoping, though, right? Because we'll get into that later. The fourth step is we look for solutions outside of ourselves, right? If I get a job, get a if only recovery. How many people's had that? If only I could fix this, if only I could fix that, and we pursue self. And anyways, that's a different conversation. So they go through all the different types here. And then with the sponsorship, they talk moderate drinkers. No, that's not me. Then we have a certain type of hard drinker. Looks like me, but it's not me. And then we have the type that the warning, given good reason to quit. And we have a fellowship full of people like that, given good reason, right? They just quit drinking.
Maybe they needed some support, right? Hanging out at meetings, hanging out with fellow sober people, right? Maybe they needed some support, but they hadn't require the change, right, necessary to bring about recovery from something. The decision to stop was powerful enough for them.
And that's why it says, if it's a significantly strong reason, ill health, falling in love, or warning of a doctor becomes operative, this man or woman could also stop or moderate, although it may find it difficult or troublesome, right, and may even need some medical attention. So if you'd sound like an alcoholic, you'd look like an alcoholic, but given good reason, you could stop on your own experience, and that would be your experience, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. Like the only requirement for membership, like you don't have to go all the way. They talk about raising the bottom, the rest of us a hit. And then there are those of us who have been given good reason. Anybody in this room? Given good reason to quit. I'm never doing that again, right? Even before coming to AA. Solomos, all that other stuff, right? You see, when Bill was of that type, right? I seen us cannot take so much as one drink. How many people knew that? How many people promised people that they'd never drink again? You get a 3-month chip, everybody's happy for you, and you're sitting there loaded in your living room. They come in, what are you doing? And you go, what? Any what's here? What? So now they get into, what about the real alcoholic? So, people get offended when you use that term. You need to understand what they mean about the real alcoholic. You hear that the heavy drinkers get offended about the people who say, I'm a real alcoholic. Oh, you're a real alcoholic, right? And they get offended by the terminology used within our book to classify what type of help you need. Because if you're able to quit given good reason and support in meetings, if meetings are your solution, meeting makers make it, and we don't drink no matter what, if that works for you, will you need a psychic change or spiritual experience? You'll do the steps to become a nicer person. Right? You hear it all the time. Why are you doing the steps? I want to become nice. I want to get in touch with me. I usually say something crude there, but I'm not gonna. It's not moving on fast. So right? Or even so, what about the real alcoholic? So we're gonna skip through this. And what do they classify as the real alcoholic when they're using that terminology in the book? So they're switching conversations now, right? About the person who can't quit, knowing they shouldn't drink, and knowing that when they do drink, all hell breaks loose. How many people know that? How many people, well, what that translates into, how many people have a consequence problem? I don't have a drinking problem, I have a consequence problem. And while they're reading how it works, I'm wondering how I'm going to solve my problems. Anybody? I've heard some great stories. We watched this, this guy goes on a drunk, right? We're watching this podcast, my wife and I, and he's married a beautiful, beautiful life, and he goes on a drunk. He knows he shouldn't drink, but something happened where he found himself drinking. He was gone for 5 weeks. And his brother got a hold of him. He said, what are you doing? Your wife's at home, your kids, your family, like, what are you doing? And so he finds himself back at home. He's about to ring the doorbell. This is us. He's thinking, my God, I got to come up with a viable excuse. Anybody here? I got to come up with a story that I can believe and I can sell. First, I got to believe, right? Anybody? Any good storytellers here? Like, how many people have been amazed with what you could come up with on the spur of the moment? I walk away and say, holy shit, that was amazing. Where did that come from? So this guy's about to ring the doorbell, and his wife opens the door. And she looks, where are you? And he says, why didn't you pay the ransom? Right? Like, that's good. And the other one was, did you go to a meeting? Yes, they're full right now. They'll let me know when there's room. Okay, go ahead. Amazing thing. Okay, so go ahead. Page 22.
Bottom of page 22. We know that while the alcoholic keeps away from drink, as he may do for months or years, he reacts much like other men because we are not triggering the allergy, right?
And the doctor made that stipulation, like, we're good people if we didn't have this problem. How many people would have a way different life if you didn't have this problem determining the existence of your life?
So
right?
In this example, we're practicing this principle of abstinence, right? Abstinence is the only solution we have to offer for this particular part of the problem. We are equally positive that once he takes any alcohol, whatever, into his system, something happens, both in the bodily and mental sense, which makes it virtually impossible for him to stop.
We understand that now as the allergy, right, everybody? So they're reiterating, giving a conclusion of everything we've learned, that they've taught us, right? Yes?
The experience of any alcoholic will abundantly confirm this. Potential alcoholic, real alcoholic, the experience of any one of us would abundantly confirm this. Most of us don't have any kind of cognitive dissonance towards this idea of the allergy, right? Many of us, most of us in this room, I would think, have had the experience, right, if we are members of AA, where we have drank to excess and suffered the consequences of such. It's not something that takes a lot to explain or to understand or concede to. These observations, right, the observations of the allergy, would be academic and pointless if our friend never took the first drink. Never took the first drink, thereby setting the terrible cycle in motion. Therefore, the main problem of the alcoholic centers in his mind rather than in his body.
Wow, that kind of, so it's hard for us to understand that, but I'm allergic to pistachios. I didn't know that the first time I ate pistachios. As time went on, I started having more severe reaction. I had some of the symptoms that I ignored. But then there came a place where it put me in the hospital. It was closing my throat. I drove to the hospital. They didn't find that funny. I said, I've driven in worse conditions. They didn't find that funny either. So I'm sitting there, and they got the IVs hooked up, and I'm sitting in emergency, and they came out and told me my situation. As the nurse was explaining my situation, how well do you think I listened to her? I didn't hear nothing else in emergency. She explained my whole situation, the EpiPens and all that. I went and got 2 EpiPens, one for traveling and one for my purse, until I found out how severe this was, right, with further testing and stuff like that. So she said I can never safely eat pistachios again. Do you think I believe her? 100% I believe her. I'm in emergency. My throat's closing. I've gotten my own attention, and she's confirmed what the situation is. So I go 3 months. I end up in Toronto, and I'm going up Yonge Street, and the snow's just happening. And they have these vendors that sell like hot pistachios, and right, and all that other chestnuts and all that other stuff, and they have an open roasted flame. And as I went by, he said, "Would you like some pistachios?" And I looked, there was no red dye on them. And I thought, that's what got me sick. I'm not allergic to pistachios. It was the red dye. So I took some, and I ended up in hospital. They sent my file over. They said, "Weren't you in the hospital 3 months ago?" I said, "Yeah." "Didn't they explain your situation?" I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, why did you eat them?" I thought it was the dye. Maladjusted, full-fledged from reality, and downright mentally defective. So imagine in the town's hospital, these alcoholics are trying to explain the things that are doing to this doctor, and then as they're saying it makes sense to them. Well, there's no, and the doctor's going, "What?" right? And so I make a solemn oath not to do it again. Anybody? I'm never doing it again. I mean it this time. Last time I was joking, but this time, anybody got this time recovery? You got this time, like the last 15 times. The humor here, if hundreds of experiences showed us, the book's funny, not one or two, hundreds of experiences showed us that we can't safely drink. But the only ones we count where there's severe consequences. Those were the times we couldn't drink successfully. All the other times, no consequence, that was a successful night, right? Didn't end up with the neighbor's wife, didn't come to a blackout. I hate that. What happened? I don't know, I just get in here myself. so I hate that question. What happened? Okay, we can't be friends. so back to, I'm traveling, I'm personal assistant to somebody. So I'm making sure I'm traveling and I end up in Belize. Right? And I'm going down this section, and there's all these ice cream parlors. And it's hot, and I looked in, and they had all these certificates. They've won like awards from all over the world on how good their ice cream is. So on the sign it says pistachio ice cream. 2 scoops for the price of 1.
Happy hour.
Happy hour. And these pistachios were from Brazil. The other ones were from Africa.
Well, obviously it was the country of origin.
Yeah, so look, that fast. You asked me 10 minutes earlier, you ever eaten pistachios? Oh no, never again. Suddenly, I thought, wow, what a great idea. So I eat the ice cream. I'm in the hospital. They're coming with my file.
And a straitjacket.
Yeah, who am I talking to now? A dietitian or a psychiatrist?
In a padded room.
In a padded room. No Mazzola either. So what happens? Sorry. Helmet, that's my 5th. Moving on. So now they're saying we're switching the concentration. There's obviously something the matter in these people's thinking.
It says here, if you ask him why he started on that last bender, the chances are he will offer you any one of 100 alibis.
Anybody?
If we use Tony's example of the allergy to pistachios, right, you know, each time this is a question that would be asked, why do you keep doing this, right? If the abundance of your experience is that you drink to excess and you experience these consequences, these very serious consequences, why is it you keep doing this? And not a one person in this room who's experienced this will say, I don't know. No. We offer any one of 100 alibis, right? We love to attach some sort of reason as to why we've taken the first drink. It's my relationship is falling apart. My job is falling apart. My boss is giving me a hard time. I have all of this trauma from my childhood. I, right? These are all the reasons why I keep doing this. Here's sometimes these excuses have a certain plausibility. They actually have no plausibility, really, if you think about it. But we become incredibly good at making the insane sound completely and utterly sane. Not only do we fall prey to these ideas, but we convince everybody around us as well that these things sound reasonable and sane.
So as an observer, would you think there was something seriously wrong with me mentally after telling that story 3 times about pistachio? But how many times have we said the same story in regards to the first drink?
None of them really make sense in light of the havoc an alcoholic's drinking bout creates, right? They sound like the philosophy of the man who, having a headache, beats himself on the head with a hammer so that he can't feel the ache, right? It's like solving these multiple problems over here with this massive problem that's always been a problem, but in our own minds it seems reasonable to solve our problems this way, right? It is about as logical as banging your head against the wall, right? Or hitting yourself in the head with a hammer in order to, solve a headache.
That may be more help than we got to offer. I don't know.
If you draw this fallacious reasoning to the attention of an alcoholic, he will laugh it off or become irritated and refuse to talk. Anybody been sat down for a long conversation about their drinking here? Love those, eh? Who sat through the indignity of a family intervention here? Yeah. Right? Once in a while he may tell the truth. I'm not sure that that's actually true, but once in a while he may tell the truth. And this truth, strange to say, is usually that he has no more idea why he took that first drink than you have.
And that's the interesting part is is we've gotten a bit of sobriety. We think we've done well, right? And when we relapse, we revert back to, look how much time I got before, trying to comfort ourselves like we were successful. You weren't successful.
I shared last night about pulling myself up by my bootstraps, right, and rebuilding my life, right? We shared with a couple of women after we broke it off last night about, changing the external, right? Taking a big deep breath, rebuilding. Like, I feel like I've lived several lifetimes in just this one, right? Building it up, tearing it down, building it up, tearing it down. Once in a while, he may tell the truth, and the truth, strange to say, is usually that he has no more idea why he took that first drink than you have. Some drinkers have excuses with which they are satisfied part of the time, but in their hearts, they really do not know why they do it. Once this malady has a real hold, they are a baffled lot.
So they just titled the second symptom in alcoholism. The first symptom centers where? In the body, and they call that the allergy. The second symptom centers where? In the mind, and they call that the malady. Not the spiritual malady, the malady that centers in the mind. Why they use that terminology is, if you look at it, it's a condition that's really unexplainable, but it's present. They really don't know how to define it. My wife has her master's in English, and she's part of the Golden Key Club. She's a smart woman. Doesn't stop me from trying to argue with her about literature. But I mean, I still have an opinion. It doesn't matter. So when I ask her about stuff, we've been together 17 years now, and I ask her about stuff in the book to reiterate, like, am I on track here? What do they mean by that? Because their major is English history. So when what most of us do when we look up a word, we look up the meaning that makes sense to us. When you look up the word malady, it has a whole bunch of conditions in there, and we'll say, oh, this is the most fitting, but what they're saying is any one of those things could fit this terminology, because it's a malady, it's an unexplainable event. So they're going to try to explain an unexplainable event that makes sense to people who are afflicted with it. So they need to give you the characteristics of what it looks like for those who suffer with it. And who will understand it the most is those who are afflicted with it. Those who are not afflicted with it will go, this makes no sense. That's why the fellowship split in two different understandings, right? There are those who think that the mental obsession is the second symptom in alcoholism, which it isn't. That's not the symptom that places you beyond human aid. That's a symptom that you could do something about it, given good reason, direction, and an application.
They clarify it in the next sentence. There is the obsession, new conversation, right? New statement. There is the obsession that somehow, someday they will beat the game. What game? If we are talking about somebody that in their hearts don't really know why they keep repeating over and over and over again the desperate attempt at the first drink, despite a strong desire not to, what game are you now playing as that person? The game of trying to stay sober, right?
See, and that's what most people think, because we got taught that. We associate the words with what we were taught, not what it says. So they use the word malady twice in this book, like in the beginning part of understanding, right? And they use the word obsession twice in different understandings. The first one time here is in regards to the idea that we could keep ourselves sober based on our own experience. They just finished saying that. Because we all agree, if I never took a drink, so it's not about controlling and enjoying my drinking, because that was clarified on page 22, that if I never took a drink, right, I would never set this terrible cycle in motion, right? Is that what the book said? So they started a new conversation about what's happening in the mind. And remember what goes, so if you ever want to, Chuck taught me this too, the guy who sponsored me, he says, if you want to see what they're talking, go back to the previous paragraphs or statement and see what follows up. So if I'm having a hard time, what are they saying here? I need to go back up through the paragraph. So they're talking about a condition in the mind, yes? Right? And the struggle is, why are they baffled? Because they keep drinking. Wouldn't anybody been baffled here? How many people have been baffled? How many people around you are baffled? You were doing so good. I know. Right? Come on. Anybody? Okay, red group. So listen. How many people has listened to including yourself? How many people has relapsed here? Come on, be proud. How many more than once? Yeah, hold a position. Some of you got that. Don't go unsupervised. So what they're saying is, if you listen, what's the great obsession is us keeping ourselves sober based on our own experience, right? If I can keep myself sober based on my own experience and the exerting of my self-will by not drinking no matter what, not picking up, meeting makers make it, and finding a solution outside of myself, am I beyond human aid? Am I of this type they're talking about now? No. So what they're saying is, if you listen to most new people, we all have excuses why we drank. Why we tie an excuse to it, that's the reason I drank. That, people, places, things, triggers, and all these circumstances. I have circumstantial sobriety. As long as the circumstances are right, I'm okay, but I can't get too happy because I get loaded then too, or don't get too sad. Walk around like an old-timers. So, I'm an old-timer now. Some of you got it. Lighten up, relax.
In other words, the kind of sobriety that as long as nobody moves, nobody gets hurt, right? It's the kind of thinking that would wrap a newcomer in bubble wrap and have them experience life, none of life at all, right? In case something extreme happens that causes them to relapse, right? And what they're saying here in regards to the obsession is a word we like to use just because of what Tony's explaining, right? If we use the word obsession as if it's a symptom of alcoholism, it reconfirms this safe idea to us that we can somehow do something about it. Because to obsess about something is to be conscious of it, constantly, right? But what they're describing here is, but in their hearts, they really do not know why they do it. Once this malady has a real hold, they are a baffled lot. There is the obsession that somehow, someday they will beat the game, but they often suspect they are down for the count. Is this an explanation of somebody who's constantly thinking about drinking? No, this is a person who wants to stay sober, has a strong desire to stay sober, has a desire to change their life, does not want to suffer the consequences, of the allergy anymore, has much knowledge about that allergy, right? Has made a decision to no longer pick up that first drink, and they continue to do it despite the desire not to.
And that's not the message of Alcoholics Anonymous, right? If you have this type, you're not going to be okay. You're in deep trouble. You're in deep trouble, and that's the message, right? We're making people feel too good before they actually have the step one experience, right? So we're passing on the solution before they understand the problem. And the solution, we're not even passing on our solution, we're asking them to come up with their own solution to a problem they don't understand. 3 days in, choose your own conception of God. Where do you get that idea to do that? First, they need to understand the identification of the problem, right? If they're already struggling with the idea, then do you understand the problem? Because if you understand the problem, then our solution will make sense. So here where they say they're going to follow up with expanding on that idea of us being our own solution. That's the first thing that needs to be smashed in regards to step one, that I cannot keep myself sober no matter what the necessity or the wish. I'll be the only one that don't know when I start drinking again because I won't see it coming. It's something I can't see, feel, and touch. It's a phantom. It's a condition in the mind that nobody can see. Well, how do you know when it's happening? Welcome back. And that's what they're going to get into now. The characteristic of the second symptom, as they all experienced it. Not some of them, all of them agree on this. So they explain it as what?
How true this is, few realize in vague way their families and friends sense that these drinkers are abnormal. But everybody hopefully awaits the day when the sufferer will rouse himself from his lethargy and assert his power of will.
Not to take the first drink. You hear that in meetings. You can do this, the cheering section of Alcoholics Anonymous. And then you relapse again, and then the shunning starts happening.
I guess you just didn't want it bad enough.
Thanks for doing more research for us. Thanks for going out for us. They're all ignorant statements made by people who don't understand alcoholism.
Eventually you'll get willing, right? As if it's just a lack of being able to pull yourself up by the bootstraps and make a decision not to pick up that first drink.
And this is where we make friends, because if you think of how ironic that is, if Bill Wilson himself came to the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous looking for help,
He never would have sobered up.
he would have
Here.
died an alcoholic death with that information.
The tragic truth is that if the man be a real alcoholic, the happy day may not arrive.
What's that? Of staying sober, longevity, staying sober under any and all conditions. We drink under any and all conditions. Hell, we don't need a condition. Our conditioning is a condition that needs conditioning. Some of you got that. Welcome.
He has lost control. At a certain point in the drinking of every alcoholic, he passes into a state where the most powerful desire to stop drinking is of absolutely no avail.
Step one experience, not while drinking. Doesn't think, well, to stop. What does stop mean for us? Well, till my birthday. Holidays and Christmas doesn't count. Like, how many people try to stop, but it's Christmas coming. If you're still worried about Christmas, then you're not our type of alcoholic. If Christmas is coming and you're worried about it, you're our type of alcoholic. You see the difference?
This tragic situation has already arrived in practically every case long before it is suspected. The fact is that most alcoholics, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice in drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We are unable, at certain times, to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of the suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We are without defense against the first drink.
That's 99 no's and 1 yes. Where that yes happens in the sequence, we're the only ones that don't know that. So what's happening here is we're describing the real alcoholic who's beyond human aid. And so our terminology starts to be, my God, I lost the power and choice whether I'm going to drink or not. Those who still have a choice, whether they drink or not, are not of our type. They don't need our solution to stay sober. Their experience will keep them sober. And the problem is they're telling us how to get sober within our fellowship, right? They don't understand the severity of our illness because they haven't experienced it at the level that we've experienced. They can't understand why we're getting drunk no matter what. They give you the impression that AA was designed for people who can stay sober, which is a lie. AA is designed for people who can't stay sober. We guilt and shame people for not being able to stay sober when we should be kind of realizing that one, they haven't experienced this thing on the level necessary to 12-step them or gone through a course of action. That's why they keep relapsing, because they haven't experienced this thing. And on the next page, they talk. Did you want to touch something else?
I do.
Okay.
Bottom of page 24, when this sort of thinking is fully established in an individual with alcoholic tendencies, he has probably placed himself beyond human aid.
What type of thinking? The malady. When they exhibit this malady, that centers where? In the mind, not the spiritual malady. Have they talked about the spiritual malady yet as a condition of step one that makes one an alcoholic? Or their behaviors before they drank? No, because that's not what makes you an alcoholic. What makes you an alcoholic is the allergy. And the progression is, as I see this is starting to cause me problems, it's still somewhat a solution to all my problems. Anybody? Remember Bill's story? People were jumping to their death? That disgusted me. Where did Bill go? Back to the bar. My people here, I'm going to leave you. Okay. Where are you going? Back to the bar. Right? And if you sit in a bar long enough, your problems will go away. Unless it's a warrant. That never goes away. But and we hear people, I lost everything. No. They lost you. You didn't lose them. They're still carrying on their lives. And what they're waiting for is, our job is when they come back to the fellowship here or come to AA for the first time, is not only them are hoping for a different, but everybody around them is hoping they have a different experience so everybody could start experiencing the promises. Because if you're the first one experiencing the promises in your life, you're not experiencing them, you're fabricating something. If the people around you are experiencing something, before you realize it, then, and people, oh, what makes you say it? The promises. You'll suddenly realize, you'll be the last one to realize, holy smokes, there's a change happening. Everybody around you will realize it before you. Kind of weird, that seems to be the theme of our life. We're the last ones to always know. I think you have a problem. Yeah, it's you. Right? And then we get to the place, oh my God, I think I have a problem. And nobody's surprised when we tell them.
When therefore we were approached, page 25, when therefore we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved.
Whoa, what? Solved? Does it still, are they dealing with, every day I wake up with untreated alcoholism. Oh my God, I feel bad for you.
Every day I have to wake up
Every
and remind
day.
myself I have alcoholism.
A life sentence. You want what I got? Hell no. Every day, could you imagine living for the rest of your life? What's appealing about that? Every day you're going to feel like this. Oh, God. Can I join this group? No. So the problem had been solved, right? What problem are they talking about that has been solved? The malady that centers where? In the mind. That means they've experienced a psychic change or spiritual experiencing, allow them to recover from this condition that's killing them. So what are you left with? Which you don't have to worry about, because the condition of mind has been shifted where I can see the danger in what I'm about to do. The story about the pistachios is made up. I'm allergic to pistachios, but I've never eaten them since, given good reason. I hadn't had to have a psychic change or spiritual experience, or, well, I was going to say supervision, but I need supervision. I'm never alone, even when I'm alone.
All of the time.
All the time. So the problem had been solved, the condition of the mind. So if that problem's solved, what does that mean? Sobriety has begun. And later they explain it as a daily reprieve, that this problem doesn't exist for us anymore. What does the alcoholic mind? So this is interesting. If you do a survey in your home group and you say, once I've had a psychic change or spiritual experience, do I still have an alcoholic mind? How many people not getting involved here? How many people are arguing in your head what we're saying? I want to leave, but people are looking. I know I should have sat farther back. Well, you got to listen to the way the book is. So if this condition is present, what am I going to continue to do? Drink. And I'm the only one that don't know when that's going to happen, right? And so the best way that it explains that is they talk about here, we're going to jump ahead here and more about alcoholism because we're on this, is page 37, where they give an example of these people who knew they shouldn't drink and they kept on drinking. How many people know Jim? Ounce of whiskey in the milk guy. Yeah, so how many people has read that story? Say, I can see why he's drinking, he's irritable, he's restless, we tie excuses to it. How many people? And then the other guy, right? Who's the other guy?
Fred.
Not a care in the world. Why do they give these two examples of two different people altogether? What do they both have in common? The malady, a condition of the mind that doesn't allow them to stay sober no matter what the necessity or the wish. So one guy doesn't have a care in the world and the other guy has all kinds of problems. But the characteristic of the example is this condition of the mind that doesn't allow them to stay sober no matter what the necessity or the wish. This malady, right? So if you're ever looking for the best explanation in the book to describe something that they're trying to describe, is actually on page 37. Once they describe this malady, they give you examples, which is really interesting. Later on, you could look it up, but one of the other examples that I think is really amazing in this book is the guy on page 26, 27, where you see he has the step one experience. The examples they give in the book of the people is they admit they have a problem, but a problem they're taking care of. So the first guy, other than Bill, in the two examples in the doctor's opinion, is here on page 26, 27, is a guy who had all the resources in the world available to him. And he thought relapse was unthinkable. Anybody remember that story? And then he relapsed again. So he went from admitting he had a problem on page 26 to the step one experience on page 27. And every single one of us need to go through that experience in order to open us up to the solution that's being presented. Every single one of us. Not one person is exempt from that. Whether you have your problem or you have our problem, which is a big difference. So anyways, page 37.
Bottom of page 36. He had much knowledge about himself as an alcoholic. Yet all reasons for not drinking were easily pushed aside in favor of the foolish idea that he could take whiskey if only he mixed it with milk. Whatever the precise definition of the word may be, we call this plain insanity. How can such a lack of proportion of the ability to think straight be called anything else?
As an observer, how many people would think he was crazy if you knew him? As a participant, does it make perfectly good sense to him? There's something going on in this guy's brain that is beyond understanding, right? Because he's been in the puzzle factory a couple times, right? He knew that he was going back there again if he ever drank. He knew what his fate was, right? But yet there he was. Suddenly, this shift in thinking that makes good sense to him, but it's crazy.
You may think this is an extreme case. To us, it is not far-fetched, for this kind of thinking has been characteristic of every single one of us.
Not some of us, every single one of who? This is what makes a real alcoholic. This is the characteristic that places us beyond human aid. This is the thing that they're going to explain that gives you I'm trying to behave myself here.
Why?
Because it's being taped. So
Yeah.
this is what puckers you up. How's that? Right? It's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
This is the oh my God moment. Like, I'm in trouble here. Most people, like Joanne was saying earlier, if you're doing step one and you're feeling good about it, you haven't done our step one. Right? So most treatment centers, if I'm paying you $60,000, I better be my solution by the time. You better give me everything I need to fix me with me. At the end of the 90 days, if you hand me a book that said, there's nothing we can do for you and we don't refund your money. Damn. Remember, treatment centers were very good for a big part of the people who went through and seen Dr. Silkworth, right? And there was a group of people that were beyond his scope or beyond his help. So in AA, there's a huge group of people that are doing quite fine with their program. Their program, you'll get that in a second. Their program consists of meetings, not drinking, right? On and on and on, building their life, working on themselves, the whole concentration. I'm working on me, I'm working on this, I'm working on that, I, and it works fine for them. Then there's another group of people, no matter what they seem to be doing, they're getting loaded all the time. Sometimes they make it to 2 years. Sometimes they make it to 5 years. Sometimes they make it to 25 years. And then something happens, take them out, and they come back and they're baffled why that happened. Because they, like my buddy, 18 years. He was coming up to his 18-year cake, and then his thinking started to shift, and nobody could tell him different. And he's still struggling to come back. Because 18 years prior to he'd never had the step one experience. It's huge. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. We have sometimes reflected more than Jim did upon the consequences, but there was always the curious mental phenomenon, the parallel with our sound reasoning. There inevitably ran some insanely trivial excuse for taking the first drink.
So what do they call it?
A curious mental phenomenon.
So let's get honest. How many people sat in a discussion meeting or a newcomer meeting or step meeting, in a meeting where they ask for topics or there's new people? Nobody here? Participate a bit, it's okay. We're still pissed off 3 pages ago. We stopped listening. 3 pages ago, I didn't like what you were saying. You're not arguing with us. You're arguing with the literature. Where are we reading from? We're reading from the literature of Alcoholics Anonymous. If you're in conflict with what we're saying, it's not us you're having a conflict with. You're having a conflict with the literature. Whoa. Now they're really pissed off. So how many people, like I spent 11 years in and out trying to find this thing. I got told, so join the army, you lack discipline, I joined it, so I came out here in 87 through, without getting into it, but I lived in Alcoholics Anonymous. So my last relapse, I did 360 meetings in 90 days. I'm in 4 12 and 12 studies. I'm not getting invited anywhere. I'm living in AA, right? That's 4 or 5 meetings a day, if you do the math, right? I got a 3-month chip. I remember April 8th. April 6th, I talked about what a great job I was doing because I did a self-assessment. Relapse is unthinkable based on my feeling, based on the past. I'm never relapsing again. What I just told you is I've never done step 1. Well, really, I'm the only one that don't know I haven't done step 1 because I just told you I'm never doing it again. That's the giveaway. The obsession has left. I just told you I've never done step 1 because I don't understand step 1 as laid out in here. I think it's a condition that I can see, feel, and touch. As long as it don't come back again, I'm going to be okay. That gives me comfort that I don't think about it or I want it, so that means I'm suffering from a human behavioral condition, not an illness. When I relapsed an hour after that meeting, and they explained this situation, I realized I'm suffering from an illness that I have no idea what's happening. And how they explained it was a phenomenon. In the 34 years I've been sober, with the 11 years of in and out, I've never heard any meeting or any speaker talk about the malady as being the condition of the alcoholic that places one beyond human aid in need of a psychic change or spiritual experience. When I hear people talk about step 1 in meetings, I never hear of this condition being a phenomenon, and invariably the people who suffer from this thing are going to drink again. And what that does is it should make you feel anxious that you're going to drink again. It should disturb you about the question on how you're approaching this thing. That's our job, is to disturb people. Are we doing a good job? Yes. Right? And the book also talks, that's our job, is to disturb people about the question of alcoholism. Because if we don't do that, then we're doing a disservice to those who are coming here looking for a solution to a problem they don't understand. Yes? And so then you get to ask, how many people would rather do something before their memorial or after? How many people would rather see their family at a first-year cake that they've rejuvenated, right? When I go, Joanne's, and people see their family and all that, and the family's in tears because of what's happened to them and the transition that they're experiencing, and it's remarkable. How many people would rather that episode by carrying this, or the memorial of why this didn't work, and you have to explain to them, well, we just told them just don't drink, and they just didn't get the message. They just didn't want this bad enough. We put the onus on them, but yet it's our job, right, to find them. Is it not? It makes a big difference on the approach to this thing. When we are responsible, that's what they're talking about. And if you haven't done this thing, it's not your responsibility. And if you're not of this type, it's not your responsibility either. It's the members who have gone through this. It's our responsibility, not all our responsibility.
It's interesting to comment on our approach to this, right? What approach are we making to this? And when I'm following instructions, because there are many programs, many 12-step fellowships, many treatment centers, many approaches that all guarantee some sort of better life or way out of this thing. And what I've learned in my approach is this confirming my own ability to reason? Or is this giving me a different experience, right? Because it says here our sound reasoning failed to hold us in check. So anything that serves to build up my ability to reason, anything that confirms to me that my ability to reason will somehow be able to help me avoid this first drink, the desperate attempt of the first drink, I know is not our solution. Because our sound reasoning fails to hold us in check. This is the nature of the malady. We made a really good example the other night. Like, you're driving on the highway, right? You're doing 110 kilometers an hour on the highway. You're in the fast lane. You're approaching a car that's in the slow lane, right? Everything's normal. Sun shining, not a cloud on the horizon. No problems. Car's running great. If that car in the slow lane slowly starts to veer over, right? You know in the moment what's happening. You have time to react. But if the car suddenly jerks over into your lane, do you have any ability to react? No. This is what they're talking about here, right? Our sound reasoning failed to hold us in check and the insane idea won out. It parallels our sound reasoning, right? And then suddenly. So any kind of solution offered to me that helps to bolster my own ability to solve my own problems, right? Bolster my own ability to reason against my own alcoholism, what they're saying here will be of absolutely no avail.
Yeah, you never been able to sell a life jacket to a person that could still swim, eh? Okay, so, anyways, they have to be drowning, right? Maybe I'll take one of those. Okay. So now the book's amazing, right? Because now the beauty about being up here is I've watched people's faces for years. I could tell. Some of you are like, yeah. Some of you are like, some of you go. And some of you leave. You'll be back. Okay, so the book is really cool because it already knows you're struggling with what it's saying. It already knows that, because to admit what it's saying is, maybe I'm in more trouble than I suspected. So on page 38, it says, some of you are thinking. Some of you are thinking. Yes, how many people would say, come on. I started thinking about 3 pages ago, and I haven't listened to the thing you said since. We do that. We hear information. We go to the cheese factory for confirmation. Like you ever been to a cheese factory? It doesn't smell good up there, right? We're in there looking for directions. Well, what do you think of what they said? Well, I don't remember. We're up there talking to ourselves now because we're the most important person in the room. That's that self-centeredness they talk about. Is I now become the most, I'm going to go talk to myself. We're going to go confirm what you're saying, whether true or not, right? So we stopped listening half an hour ago. So here we go. So some of you are thinking,
yes, what you tell us is true, but it doesn't fully apply. We admit we have some of these symptoms.
Like it has happened. Yes, there's a few times I've found myself drinking when I didn't want to. Yeah, anybody? Yeah, I could say looking back, yeah, but I didn't mean it then. I mean it now.
But we have not gone to the extremes you fellows did, nor are we likely to, for we understand ourselves.
For me,
so well after what you have told us that such things cannot happen again. We have not lost everything in life through drinking, and we certainly do not intend to. As if the rest of us did.
Sorry about your experience, but watch this. Right. Okay.
Thanks for the information. That may be true of certain non-alcoholic people who, though drinking foolishly and heavily at the present time, are able to stop or moderate.
They're doing a full circle again because they talked about that on page 21. Now they're going to go back to, well, what about the people who are like us? How shall we help our alcoholic readers to determine whether they're one of us? That's it, right? So a lot of times we go, oh, I'm working on step 1. Are you drinking? Like when you bring the car to the mechanic, the problem's already happened. You don't go bring the car to the mechanic's lot and says, give me 5 minutes. I'm going to create a problem. You bring it there because there's a problem that already exists that you can't seem to fix, manage, or ignore anymore. Does that kind of make sense? That's how we end up in AA.
Here with our check engine light on.
I put black tape over it, but it seems to be still there, right? And so then what will the mechanic do? Diagnose the symptoms that are already there. Then we make all those weird noises. There you go, yeah. And then he'll diagnose the car, right? Has anything changed? Now he's confirming that there is a problem there, and he gives you the exact nature of that problem. Then what will he do? Well, no, he'll give you a solution to that problem, right? I need to do this, and this to fix this problem. And as the result of this course of action that I'm talking about, it will fix this problem. It will no longer exist anymore. Well, if you brought your car there and he did that course of action and you gave him $1,300 and you left and the problem was still there that you had to work on every day, how many people would be choked? But that's how a lot of us go through recovery. I'm working on this thing. Your face shows it. Right? Happy, joyous, and free. Sure. Kick the cat through the screen door. Okay,
But the actual or potential alcoholic, with hardly an exception, will be absolutely unable to stop drinking on the basis of self-knowledge. This is a point we wish to emphasize and re-emphasize.
think that's important? So what's our job as sponsors is to take people through this. So it's a responsible member of Alcoholics Anonymous will not jump somebody into the solution or a four-step until they take them through this. If you're a responsible member of Alcoholics Anonymous who understands Alcoholics Anonymous, you will start a new person in the big book and not even introduce them to the 12 and 12 till they've been through this process.
So here they start taking us through the example we referred to earlier of Fred. Fred's concerned, that maybe he's showing some signs of alcoholism, but maybe not all of them, right? He accepts some information from good standing members who are armed with the facts about themselves, so he's approached with whom the problem had been solved. And he decides that, he's showing some signs, but his ability to just choose not to drink should be strong enough. That's how he's solved other problems in his life. That's how he's going to solve this problem.
Yeah, self-knowledge would fix it. Top of 40. Yep.
He flies to Washington. He conducts some business. He has a great day, right? He's the no cloud on the horizon guy. He goes back to his hotel, leisurely dresses for dinner. As he crosses the threshold of the dining room, the thought came to mind it would be nice to have a couple of cocktails with dinner. Suddenly. That was all, nothing more. I ordered a cocktail in my meal, then I ordered another cocktail. After dinner, I decided to take a walk. When I returned to the hotel, it struck me a highball, because what's happening now? The allergy, right?
Also, what's interesting with these stories, when you catch it, is these people who go from admitting they have a problem to the step one experience. Most people who have a problem are under the impression that they can do something about it. Self-knowledge. This relapse is unthinkable. You hear people say that all the time. It starts with the conversation of people who don't understand this illness is the obsession is left, I don't think about it. What you just said is you don't understand alcoholism, or it doesn't apply to you. That you're of the type of giving good reason, or you're the type that don't know you're heading for another drink. You're under the delusion that how you feel is going to keep you sober. You're under the delusion that you'll be able to create the safeguard against the first drink. That's not the message. So he's under the delusion that self-knowledge would fix it. That's a big part of our fellowship. You hear it in the sharing all the time. It's I statements.
Here he finds himself loaded, right? Comes back from Washington, New York. Wife's not there to pick him up from the airport. Instead, he finds a friendly cab driver who he parties with for several days. Fred sounds like a good time, right? Then came the hospital with the unbearable mental and physical suffering. As soon as I regained my ability to think, I went carefully over that evening in Washington. Not only had I been off my guard, I had made no fight whatever against the first drink. This time I had not thought of the consequences at all. Over on the next page, it says, 2 of the members of Alcoholics Anonymous came to see me. They grinned. You know that grin.
Oh, all too well.
Which I didn't like so much, and then asked if I thought myself alcoholic and if I were really licked this time. I had to concede both propositions. They piled on me heaps of evidence to the effect that an alcoholic mentality such as I had exhibited in Washington was a hopeless condition. They cited cases out of their own experience by the dozen. This process snuffed out the last flicker of conviction that I could do the job myself.
So you see the transition on that? The page previous, they're like what we're doing, we're explaining the illness. There's a lot of rebuttals happening in your own mind to the information you're hearing, just like he did. And he talked about that. I was much impressed with what you fellows said about alcoholism, and I frankly did not believe it possible for me to drink again. I rather appreciated your ideas about the subtle insanity which precedes the first drink. This changeover in thinking that I'm the only one unaware of it. He's saying, I appreciate it. Thank you for telling me that. That's good. I'll watch for it. right? I'll watch for it. So he still has he had the step one experience yet? Does he believe he has a problem? 100%. He believes he has a problem. And he's doing everything about it. He's taking it hypothetically to meetings. He's talking about it. He's checking in, right? He's working on his defects. He's working on himself, right? He's watching his old behaviors. Is this sounding any familiar? Right? Like those are the things that get me drunk. Right? Anybody? So that's why they go from a nice guy to a shitty guy. It doesn't matter what's happening externally if something hasn't changed up here. And what's the step one experience on the next page?
I find it particularly interesting that through Fred's story, not once do these people attempt to try to take him through any sort of course of action. All they've done is present him with information, right? He thanks them, he goes on his way. Once he's ready to concede to both these propositions, then they outline the spiritual answer, and not until, right?
Well, let's look at the step one experience. I guess this is where we're staying, because really, when you get into the other stuff, it makes no sense until you understand this stuff. And for whatever reason, the powers that be have us moving in this direction, right? So let's see his step one experience, which is our job to get the new people to tell on themselves, for them to see it in their own life, to become aware of what everybody else already knows and to see it. So it says, as soon as I regain my ability to think straight. How many people have been there? What happened? What the hell? How many relapsers here? How many people were doing great before you relapse, and then you relapse, it's like, what the hell happened? And the people around you, what the hell happened? Everybody's wondering what the hell happened. Me too. And he's going to tell you what the hell happened. Go ahead.
You want me to read it again? I've already read
as
that.
soon as I regain my... You read that already?
I did.
Where was I?
I don't know.
I was thinking what they were thinking when I was thinking.
We were certainly thinking.
Yeah. I knew from that moment that I had an alcoholic mind. On the next page, page 42. What does that mean? He knew from that moment he had an alcoholic. What does that mean to have an alcoholic mind? You hear people say, oh, my isms. That's not an alcoholic mind. That's your humanism. That's just your bullshit becoming real on a constant basis. Oh, sorry, did I say that out loud? That's what my sponsor used to talk to me like that. He was insensitive.
I don't know, I wasn't listening.
So, yeah. Exactly. So when they talk about you had an alcoholic mind, what are they referring to? The malady, this condition that leads me back to drink, not my behaviors while sober. That's the human condition that we apply spiritual principles to. How can we treat alcoholism? Do we have a treatment for alcoholism? No. We agreed that it's beyond our ability to fix, change, or alter. As long as it's present, we continue to drink. We don't have a solution, right, that we apply to alcoholism. We have a solution for it. And what's that? It creates a psychic change or spiritual experience sufficient enough to have this component of the problem removed. What problem? Where I no longer have an alcoholic mind. Right? So I haven't dealt with alcoholism in over 34 years. Meaning, since I've experienced a psychic change or spiritual experience, that component of the illness has not returned. Do I still have an allergy to it? 100%. As long as I don't put it into my system, I'll never have to worry about that. Am I still allergic to pistachios? 100%. Right? But if I have a mind that always wants me to eat them, it doesn't matter what, I'm going to be hooped, right?
I saw that willpower and self-knowledge would not help me in those strange mental blank spots. I had never been able to understand people who said that a problem had them hopelessly defeated. I knew then it was a crushing blow. Later on down the page, they say they outlined the spiritual answer and program of action, which 100 of them had followed successfully. Though I had been only a nominal churchman, their proposals were not intellectually hard to swallow. But the program of action, though entirely sensible, was pretty drastic. It meant I would have to throw several lifelong conceptions out the window. That was not easy. But the moment I made up my mind to go through the process, I had the curious feeling that my alcoholic condition was relieved, and in fact it proved to be. Quite as important was the discovery that spiritual principles would solve all my problems. I have since been brought into a way of living, infinitely more satisfying, and I hope more useful than the life I lived before. My old manner of life was by no means a bad one, but I would not exchange its best moments for the worst I have now. I would not go back to it even if I could. Fred's story speaks for itself. We hope it strikes home to thousands like him. He had felt only the first nip of the ringer. Most alcoholics have to be pretty badly mangled before they really commence to solve their problems. Once more, at the bottom of the page, what they're wanting to confirm out of this whole chapter, smartly titled More About Alcoholism, once more, the alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink. Before we move on to anything else, this is the thought that must go with us into the next chapter, right? They've repeated it over and over and over again. We want to confirm and reconfirm, reiterate, right? This one single point. The alcoholic at certain times has no effective mental defense against the first drink. Except in a few rare cases, neither he nor any other human being can provide such a defense. His defense must come from a higher power.
Which is kind of interesting. So has this guy now had the step one experience? Big difference in his story now, right? Huge. And how many people have been there in that transition, the shift in the realization that step one promises they're doomed to an alcoholic death, and the solution being offered, or a solution course of action. We have two alternatives. We're already living one way of life, the other one's being presented. So when they talk about the first qualification on, in the preceding chapters, you've learned something of alcoholism. Not before you got here, not while drinking. In the preceding chapters, what chapters? The ones that we've just all gone through, from the title page right to here. You've learned something of alcoholism. Well, what did you learn? We hope we have made clear the distinction between an alcoholic and a non-alcoholic. Have they done that? I know exactly what they're talking. So now you know for the first time what type of alcoholic you are. If you haven't been through this yet, or you haven't had a responsible member of Alcoholics Anonymous take you through this, you don't know what type of alcoholic you are. You're under the impression that you could fix you with you if you really mean it. And it's going to take a couple more relapses and another member, hopefully someone gets a hold of you and gets you through this thing. Go ahead.
If when you honestly want to...
Biggest word in the book,
Yeah.
If.
When you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic.
See how they switched that? Now they went with the mind first and then the body. If you can't stop drinking, including weekends, holidays, and Christmas. If you can't stop, right, then you're probably why? Because you have this malady and the allergy, right? Then they go with the qualifier, what your hope is.
If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. To one who feels he is an atheist or agnostic, such an experience seems impossible, but to continue as he means disaster, especially if he is an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. To be doomed to an alcoholic death,
Step one.
or to live on a spiritual basis,
Step two.
are not always easy alternatives to face. Interesting that they don't use the word options, right? Alternatives, one or the other, no other options.
So we have this illness as the result of it having a hold of us, right? The solution comes as the result of it. The result, meaning we have to go through it to have this experience. Starting it, we're still in the wood, like we're still in trouble. We need to have this experience. What experience? The psychic change or spiritual experience that comes as the result of this course of action. So, all the way through here, I cannot create the change that I need to experience in order to recover. Anybody like that here? Anybody know what their fate is now? If you're of this type of alcoholic, you're going to be doomed to an alcoholic death. How many people that gives you a warm, fuzzy feeling? That's step one. If you get a warm, fuzzy feeling, then you may need more help than we have to offer. Right? And so then they get into, if a mere code, like page 417 and working on it, all that stuff worked, a lot of us would have a lot more sobriety, right?
Let's really look at this, what they're about to say here, because it's where a lot of the fellowship lands, right? They have no concern. Yes, I'm happy to have a spiritual experience. I have no objections to spiritual principles. But then they continue to try to apply just a mere code of morals as if that is the necessary spiritual experience. If a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago.
True? How many people have been applying self to self for years now? I'm on the pursuit of spiritual well-being. Ding! I even bought yoga pants, for God's sake, right?
How many
Joined
of my ladies are out at the bookshop buying and spending money on books, right, in the self-help movement, right, trying to have a different experience?
Then you're burning incense, and then you find yourself starting to smoke some, but that's a different issue. I bought the rock,
I'm never telling you anything
dropped
ever
the
again.
rock, and then picked up the rock and started smoking it. Okay, go ahead.
But we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us no matter how much we tried. We could wish to be moral. We could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could will these things with all our might. But the needed power wasn't there.
What power are they talking about? To create what? A psychic, a specific change that they read in the back of the book. You don't have to guess what it is. Read what it is. A change sufficient enough to have this problem removed, that we recovered from it. What usually takes place in a few months could seldom have been brought about by years of self-discipline. This phenomenon that seems to, they call this change a phenomenon. So the allergy is a phenomenon, what happens in the brain is a phenomenon, and the solution is a phenomenon when it happens to us. So they explain it by examples. This is what it looks like if you have this problem. This is what it looks like if you have that problem. This is what it looks like if you experienced it. So the spiritual appendix gives you an outlay of what we could expect as the result of these things. This is a collective experience based on a collective course of action, based on a collective understanding. So the collective, our understanding, is lack of power is our dilemma. Yes? That I can't create this change that I need to. It didn't stop me from trying to create it. Anybody?
Our human resources, as marshaled by the will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly. This is probably one of my, it's not my favorite sentence in the book, but I find it the most interesting, right? Because it really describes a human reaction to a problem.
Welcome Back usually covers it.
Our human, right? We are human. Resources is just another word for tools. As marshaled by our will, our human tools, marshaled by our ability to think, right? This is how we approach every problem in our lives. We have a problem, we look for the tools that we have, we think of a solution, we apply the tools to the problem, and it fails utterly, right? And as it comes to alcoholism. That the real problem was that lack of power was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves.
Longest sentence in the book.
Obviously.
Right. Subtle humor, obviously, to everybody but us, right?
But where and how were we to find this power? It's a really great question at this point in the process, right? We've gotten all of this information about how seemingly hopeless alcoholism is, right? They keep confirming all of this information that our ability to solve our own problems is going to be of absolutely no avail against this thing. Now they're telling us that the real problem has been because we've lacked the power to do anything about it. So the question now has to be, where do I find this power?
Which is interesting because how many people have been to discussion meetings where they're reading some and everybody starts talking about what they think it means? They think the question mark is for you to answer. Oh, there's a question mark. Oh, finally they're asking me what I think. No, they're not. They've never asked you what you thought so far, have they? Because they know what you think and it's not good. They still know you're unsupervised at this point of the game, right?
The book always presents a dilemma or a problem and then describes a solution, right?
So the question mark is they're going to answer it. Most people think step 2 is now let the quest begin. I'm going to go find God. Come on, how many people thought that? That's what step 2 is. Oh, it doesn't say that in step 2 anywhere, that you need to find God.
How many people have been suggested that the way to find some sort of spiritual answer is to start going off in other directions with other books and other literature? When the very next statement says, that's exactly what this book is about, right?
What?
I will repeat it. That's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve all your problems.
So ready? So the first part, up to we agnostics,
In the-
brings us,
In the preceding chapters, you have learned something of alcoholism.
right? Now we're going to talk about the human dilemma, the human problem, our thinking and our understanding of things. Like Bill was having with Ebby. Remember, his own thinking was getting in the way of being, so now they're going to navigate us through our thinking. And all three people have the same problem. Atheist, agnostic, and true believer all have the same problem at this stage of the game. What is that? Lack of power. Because remember that guy felt good about his religious teachings, but it didn't spell the necessary spiritual experience. That's why, I don't know where the idea came from, was choose your own conception. It doesn't say that here, does it? So you have to use the word conception. What it does is says choose your own understanding of what we're talking about. Choose your own conception, what makes sense to you, what we're talking about. So you need to understand what we're talking about. So as we understand him, how do we understand him? Lack of power is our dilemma, that we had to get access to a power. Is that all our understanding or just some of our understanding? All our understanding at this stage of the game. The spiritual appendix in the back of the book says all our members have tapped into a inner resource of strength. So it just, as you go through this, it navigates you to find a place where you can get a conception, meaning a course of action or an understanding sufficient enough for you to follow through in the rest of the course of action. Because what's the purpose of this book is to get you tied into that power. Well, where and how will we define this power? Well, it's like how many people have a GPS? Or been around a person with a GPS? How many people are still here? We've lost a couple of people. We're doing a good job. I'm gonna buy my book.
You and I are sober.
So a GPS is like this. I'm in a situation that I don't know how to get out from, basically, but I know I need to get to this location. I don't know how to get there from where I am, so I punch it into the GPS, right? And what will it do? It'll start saying calculating, right? What is it calculating? Where you are. It starts with where you at and how can I get you there? And they'll calculate a route. Here they're saying this is where you're at. Lack of power. So where do we start from? Page 55. You can read this later. Page 54, 54 is probably the most profound page in this book. Meaning that we already operate with all the principles they talk about, but we're not connected to the power that create change. That we're exactly the result of our thinking and actions. We're some result of our feelings, thinking, and actions, right? Our belief system, we're some result of that, and what we're trying to do is incorporate a new one. So on 55, they talk about this power, this GPS, this beacon being located where? Deep down within.
We found the great reality deep down within us. In the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found. It was so with us.
Last analysis. After that, you don't need to look no more when you discover this thing within us. And we've all had it. Moments of something that's talked to you, something deep within, or somebody's thought about somebody and then they phoned you. There's always this life force that's been there, right? That's questioned you. What are you doing? And you go, I don't know. You trying to kill me? Maybe. You know, anybody with that voice? How many people talk to that voice? Or have it talk to you? Hey, what are you doing? Anybody?
In the preceding paragraph to it, it said actually we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, but in some form or other it is there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves, and miraculous demonstrations of that power in human lives are facts as old as man himself. In those kinds of principles, the rest of the course of action starts to take on new meaning, right? If this is where I am, and this is where I need to get to in order to have access to power, right? I need a course of action to get me there, right? Now a step 4 inventory has absolutely nothing to do with me getting to know my triggers or even myself even better. It's about getting to know and understand those things in my makeup that are blocking me from this power. The first thing I need to know is what are the obstacles between point A and point B, right? If point B is my solution that's going to save my life, right? How to be rid of these obstacles, right? So that as I get there through this course of action, I make it to the destination I need to be at. Where do you want to go now?
So I'm going to go through this fast, but this is the way the book's laid out. So we dealt with steps 1 and 2. We agnostic is the beginning of step 3. Gets to a place where you could follow through with this thing, that find a place comfortable enough that what's being presented, that you could pursue this thing with your own understanding of the conception of a group of ideas that allow me to move forward. Does that kind of make sense? Conception, the formulating an idea or game plan. So I need to get here, but how am I getting from here to here? The formulating of an idea or game plan. We've already presented that. We've already talked about the main purpose of this book is that I could have my own experience with what they're talking about. Yes? So when we get through this, they're talking about the human dilemma all the way through here. And they talk about when they get into 60 after how it works is being convinced. Any life run on self-will, they talk about how they got convinced, and we need to get convinced. I can't get convinced by reading page 62, 63. I need to do step 4 to see what they're talking about. And as I do step 4, I start learning certain recipes that they talked about as a form of, which is the basis for step 11. Step 4 is the foundation for step 11. Gets me connected. At the end of step 4, we see it confirms what the whole purpose of step 4 is that Joanne's talking about. We hope.
Thank you. We hope you are convinced now that God can remove whatever self-will has blocked you off from him.
And what are those things that are blocking us off from him? Resentment, fears, the manifestation of self, which is defeating it. Resentment, fears, conducts, and harms. These are the things that are blocking me off, that are poisoning me by the harboring or hanging on to these things. So when they talk about the spiritual malady, what's the spiritual malady a derivative of? What's causing this spiritual malady that seems to be our problem? The poisoning of oneself and the cutting us off from source. Is these things, the manifestation of these things. What is the manifestation of these things? Resentments, fears, conduct. Because as I'm sober, right, what will cut me off from the life force again? Resentment, fears, conduct, and harms. Right? What's the human condition that tends to kind of stop us from having the experience we're looking for? Resentment. Anybody? Fears? Anybody know any other people who are non-alcoholic who are full of resentments? Do they have a happy, joy-free look on their face? How many people have been in the fellowship a while and they talk about, if you want what I got? Oh, hell no. The promises are coming true. Well, somebody should tell your face, right?
If you have already made a decision and an inventory of your grosser handicaps, you have made a good beginning. That being so, you have swallowed and digested some big chunks of truth about yourself.
So then it tells us the purpose of 4 is to remove the blocks, yes? And as we go through their process, somewhere along the line, it connects us to this life force, this thing, power greater than God, if you're okay with that, whatever. What you call it is secondary, is the experience that matters. This experience that we hope, this experience that you're through the application of these principles, are removing these things that are poisoning you. So it's right at the end of 4. And then it reiterates what this is about on the next page, 72. Having made our personal inventory, what shall we do about it? We've been trying to get a new attitude, a new relationship with our Creator. We had to discover the obstacles in our path. What are the obstacles in our path? Resentment, fears, and harms, and conduct. Right? Step 6, ready to have God remove all these defects of character. What are those defects? Resentment, fears, harms, and conduct. Oh, that's mind-blowing. Step 7, reiterate step 3, our purpose and design, that we're not working on ourselves. Nowhere does it say to work on you. You're the problem. If you're working on you, that explains why your life looks the way it does. Stop it. Right? Huh? Come on. Huh? You want outhouse recovery or you want indoors? Sorry. So as we go through here, we see step 6 goes into step 11, step 7 gets completed. Why? Because step 7 is the reintroducing of the commitment we made in 7, that God is going to be our Father, where it's kind of like that line, that all I need to worry about is my relationship with His power, and He'll remove all the obstacles in my way. What are the obstacles in my way? My thinking, reaction, and the harboring of these things. So step 6, 90% of those will get removed, and the rest will go into 11. What are those things that we still harbor? Is those things that are still attached to our memory, soul, or ill feelings toward anybody still have resentment against family here? You want to know how spiritual you are? Go hang around with who? Your family.
Well, most of you are about to have Thanksgiving dinner tomorrow, right? We'll see how that goes.
Yeah, some days you love them because you're spiritually fit, yes? And when you're spiritually unfit, your teeth start growing a bit, and you start dragging your nails again, and then they're reminded, here you are again, right? So that's why in 11, step 11 is the only step that combines the whole thing, right? It removes the compartmentalization of this thing, meaning the whole purpose is to get connected to a power greater than ourselves, yes? That's the whole purpose, yes?
This is the design for living, right? Now we're no longer talking about steps. We're talking about these collective principles and how they interact with each other.
So when people say, I'm working on 10, 11, and 12, they don't know they're lying. Whoa, better start reading.
Also, we've made our list, step 8, and we commence to go out and clean up the wreckage of our past in step 9. We should already be engaging in step 11.
And 12.
Over on page 84, and we have ceased fighting anything or anyone, even alcohol. For by this time sanity will have returned.
By what time? By the time you read step 10? No. By the time you're halfway through. Right? Halfway through it. That's their experience. So they will always materialize if we work for them. This thought, not this group of, this thought says you can experience this too. Somewhere along the line, you'll experience this psychic change or spiritual experience. They are not the 9-step and 10-step promises. Because if you could experience the 9-step promises by doing 9 steps, how many people would do the rest of the steps? We're just that type of people.
We react sanely and normally, and we will find that this has happened automatically. We will see that our new attitude toward liquor has been given us without any thought or effort on our part. It just comes. That is the miracle of it. We are not fighting it, neither are we avoiding temptation. We feel as though we had been placed in a position of neutrality, safe and protected. We have not even sworn off. Instead, the problem has been removed. It does not exist for us.
And that's because, we'll close with this idea. When should one start step 11? Right after step 7. As soon as you finish your 5 and you read through 8 and 9, because you read through it, it says, let's look at it. It doesn't say do anything about it, because we don't want you going out unsupervised. You unsupervised is what created this, right? So don't do nothing until you talk to somebody, right? Let's read through it slowly. Don't move. Right?
Well, think about it in terms of going out to do those 9-step amends, right? And not having the principle of 11th step with you, right? As Bill talked about, putting his common sense becomes uncommon sense, right? This is the principle he lives by, right? Relating himself to this power, keeping in counsel with it when he goes out to make these amends, right? This is how we complete this process and actually make our way through these things, is hand in hand with this relationship with this power deep down within.
So the instructions on how to experience what they talk about on page 84, 85 are on 86, 87, 88. It's the only 24-hour application of these principles talked about in the book. Nowhere else does it talk about that. It's putting it all together as a design for living. So that's why they start off when we retire at night. What night? The night you finish reading step 7 and you've read through 8 and 9. You haven't done anything. And it gives you the idea that you could experience what we think not. Why? Because we've experienced them. If you haven't experienced, hell yeah, they're extra promises, yes. Because we haven't done anything yet. So step 11 says, when we retire at night, upon awakening, all through the day, We pause when agitated. This needs to become a working part of the mind. What? Step 11 in the application of these principles that keep us connected to Source. When doubtful, we ask for direction. What is step 11? Sought through prayer and meditation. People hate 11 because they're self-sufficient in 10. People talk more about step 10 is because it's all about self still. Stage 1, recovery. Stage 2, recovery is all about our relationship with a power greater than ourselves. That's why 90% of people love step 10. I'm still working on me. And when I think there's a problem, then we'll bring God into it. We better close before it turns into a lynch mob.
Thank you, everyone, for letting us be of service this weekend.
After that, we better have some prayer.
And we should close with prayer.
What do we all need for a bit of peace and quiet right now?
God,
grant me the serenity
to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference.
So this is recorded. If you couldn't believe what we were saying, you get to listen to it again.